Chapter 9:18. On the battlefield in the western suburbs, it was a shocking scene. Overlooking the entire battlefield from above, one would see a shocking scene. The Great Xia army was located in the west, with a total of 80,000 soldiers. Below them were two infantry divisions of the Somali army, the Direct Brigade and the Musketeer Brigade, and the three cavalry divisions of the Dragonblood Cavalry. Di Qing personally oversaw the Central Army, accompanied by Ma Chao. The north and south could be seen as the two wings of the Central Army. Each had 20,000 soldiers, including half of the infantry division of the Somali Army and a cavalry division of the Dragonblood Cavalry. The commander of the south was Ma Ting, the commander of the Dragonblood Cavalry Division, while the commander of the north was an infantry division of the Somali Army. In the east was the navy, led by Alvaro, with a total of 20,000 soldiers. The remaining infantry division and cavalry division of the Somali Army were not on the main battlefield. The infantry division was responsible for guarding Friendship City, while the cavalry division was mainly responsible for the safety of the rations and the custody of the prisoners of war. On the entire battlefield, the cavalry was the most numerous, and they were all from the Imperial Guards. Next were the infantry, and the navy was only slightly inferior to the infantry. This was also one of the reasons why Di Qing chose the siege tactic. Although the cavalry was not good at attacking cities, they were good at intercepting the enemy in the wilderness. The four armies encircled King City's wooden bone city tightly. The most shocking was still the western suburbs. As a famous general, Di Qing's arrangement of troops was still meticulous even before the war started. The 80,000 soldiers formed a long military formation across the wilderness of the western suburbs, forming an impregnable steel isolation belt with the cavalry in front and the infantry behind. On both sides of the military formation, there were elite cavalry guards. 6 temporary checkpoints and their passages divided the military isolation belt into 7 sections. In the middle was the command center, which was guarded by the Direct Brigade and the Musketeer Brigade. Behind the isolation belt was an empty wasteland. Thousands of large iron pots were temporarily set up to cook porridge and distribute it to the citizens of Monarch City who had fled here. Before the commotion began, there were already more than 70,000 citizens gathered here. In front of the isolation belt was also a wasteland. Due to strategic considerations, forests were not allowed near Monarch City, not even shrubs, because it was barren. There were more citizens gathered on the wasteland than at the back, a total of 120,000 to 30,000. Because the crowd was so dense, it was almost stuck to the military formation. The commoners at the very front could already smell the pungent smell of the war horses. Behind the crowd was the moat and the white city wall. Only the drawbridge and the west gate were connected to each other. Before the riot began, there was still a steady stream of people pouring out of the city gates, gathering into the sea of people in the wilderness. At the same time, the city gate was densely packed with people. The streets, the houses, and even the roofs were filled with people. Even further away, a large number of people were gathering from all over the city. The entire western suburbs were filled with people as far as the eye could see. How could they not be shocked? Due to hunger, the small west gate became the only escape route for the 700,000 citizens of King City. The sudden arrival of the Somali Imperial Guards and the announcement that they were going to seal the city gates naturally caused an uproar among the crowd. Hundreds of thousands of people rioting together, what kind of scene would that be? The citizens of Royal City, who were stuck between the city walls and the barracks, were like startled birds, desperately squeezing out of the city. As a result, the pressure began to spread from the city gates, forming a monstrous wave that engulfed everything. It was like throwing a stone into the calm surface of a lake, creating circles of waves, from inside to outside, from near to far, continuously spreading outwards. The surging crowd split into 6 arrowheads from the 6 checkpoints and crazily surged towards the rear of the army. People squeezed and pushed each other. It was impossible to continue the checkpoint inspection. If they were to forcefully inspect now, a riot would be right in front of them. Even soldiers who had been through hundreds of battles felt their palms sweating at the sight of such a crazy crowd. The situation was gradually getting out of control. Di Qing looked at the chaotic battlefield and said, "Pass the order to the various divisions, stay where you are and form an external formation." "Yes, sir." Di Qing was not only worried that the Somali king would take advantage of the chaos to escape, but he was even more worried about the Somali coalition forces in King City. If the enemy launched an attack at this time, it would be terrible. It was precisely because of this that the army could not fall into disarray. As long as the army stabilized their position, any wave caused by the citizens would not be enough to change the direction of the war. At this moment, a scream suddenly came from the empty space in front of and behind the isolation belt. Even in the hustle and bustle of the scene, this scream was still ear-piercing. Accompanied by the scream, a middle-aged man in the crowd was seen lying in a pool of blood, with a sharp knife in his chest. Blood was gushing out, soaking the yellow soil beneath him. It seemed like he would not be able to survive. Oh no, murder, murder! The sudden blood and death caused the crowd to become more and more frenzied, and they desperately squeezed forward. In order to create more chaos in the crowd, the Somali players did not hesitate to wave their butcher's knife at the NPC citizens. The first scream was like a signal to move. Following that, screams continuously sounded from the crowd. It was like the god of death, mercilessly harvesting fresh lives. A few tigers mixed into a group of sheep, and when the tigers revealed their fangs, what would the situation be like? The already restless crowd completely exploded, and the surging crowd rushed towards the checkpoint recklessly. That checkpoint, that passageway, seemed to have become the dividing line between life and death, between peace and war. It was especially eye-catching. But was the checkpoint safe? Not necessarily. At this moment, another scream came from the checkpoint passageway. This time, the scene was completely chaotic, and there was no longer a safe place. The frenzied crowd began to rush towards the military formation. In the hearts of the citizens, at this moment, only the Great Xia army, this group of hateful invaders, could protect them. How ironic! Retreat, retreat quickly! Facing the surging crowd, the cavalry on the periphery raised their long spears with a biting cold glint. These cavalrymen were all from the Imperial Guards. They were determined, calm, and unmoved. Their bodies emitted an awe-inspiring murderous aura, causing people to shrink back. There was no doubt that if someone really rushed into the formation, these ruthless cavalrymen would definitely stab with their long spears. The crowd was stagnant. However, behind the cavalry, the infantrymen from the Somali army were somewhat flustered. Most of the members of the army were prisoners of war from Morocco, and they did not have much combat experience. In the face of such a large formation, it was inevitable that they would not be able to adapt. Fortunately, the backbone generals of the army were from other field armies, and they quickly stabilized the formation. Right now, the only thing the army could do was to form a square formation and not be separated by the crowd. Once they were separated and caught in the sea of people, the consequences would be unimaginable. No one knew how many assassins were hidden in the crowd. The citizens were intimidated by the army and did not dare to attack the formation. They could only desperately rush to the rear. In their hearts, the rear was already the last place of peace. Unfortunately, they were ultimately going to be disappointed. Not long after the assassination, tens of thousands of professional Somali players, who had quietly assembled at the rear, took out their weapons one by one and bared their fangs at the Great Xia army. Kill! Kill the invaders! The players shouted slogans and waved the butcher's knife at the Somali army. The attack was so sudden that the infantrymen of the army were caught off guard and suffered heavy losses. What a treacherous scoundrel! The Great Xia army was furious. They immediately turned around and fought with these players. In the process, the formation was inevitably impacted. Fortunately, the army was well trained and could still fight with the mutants while blocking the surging crowd. The most innocent people were the commoners of the capital. They were like a bunch of rabbits, panicking and out of their wit. Yet, they continued to provoke trouble. As the fighting at the rear gradually intensified, the commoners who were originally at the rear were like frightened birds and fled to the wilderness further away without hesitation. The great Xia commander, Di Qing, looked at everything with an ashen face. He had no time to consider whether the Somali king had already escaped from the encirclement. The most important thing at the moment was how to control this chaotic situation. The central army, which was divided into 7 parts, was surrounded by people in all directions. The scene was extremely chaotic. The best way was to gather the entire army together. However, Di Qing did not dare to do so. If they were to cut off the checkpoint and disperse the crowd, the situation would only worsen. Without the escape route, the crowd would recklessly rush toward the army. This passage had already become the lifeline for the commoners to escape. Only by leading the crowd deeper into the wilderness could they survive this crisis. Therefore, not only could they not cut off this passage, but they also had to arrange for soldiers to maintain the safety of the passage and be responsible for eliminating the assassins hidden in the passage. What a great irony! Di Qing thought that the current chaos was already the worst situation. Unfortunately, he still underestimated the enemy's viciousness. Just as the situation became more chaotic, the Imperial Guards who were previously ordered to seal the city gates were mobilized again. This was a cavalry unit. After issuing the warning to seal the city gates, the Imperial Guards seemed to have received some kind of signal. When the chaos outside the city started, they immediately ignored the commoners near the city gates and directly charged toward the city gate. It was easy to imagine what kind of tragedy it would cause if a group of cavalry charged through a densely packed crowd. In an instant, dozens of people couldn't dodge in time and were trampled to death by the warhorses. Whoosh! Strangely enough, in that instant, the crowd in front miraculously made way for the cavalry unit. The people would rather be thrown into the crowd and squeezed into meat patties than face the trampling of this group of demons. It had to be said that the potential that erupted in a critical moment was really amazing. The cavalry unit quickly rushed to the city gates. The strange thing was that they didn't take the opportunity to close the gates and complete their mission. Instead, they rushed out and rushed into the crowd outside the city. How can this be? The commoners near the city gates couldn't believe their eyes. Their army actually disregarded their lives and wantonly trampled on them. They were even more abominable than the great Xia army. What kind of cold-blooded king have we chosen? The commoners' faces were pale, and their bodies couldn't stop trembling. Their hearts were completely cold and filled with despair. These commoners didn't know that to the Somali king, sacrificing some commoners was nothing in order to preserve his life and the throne. Chapter 9:19. The Imperial Guards rampaged through the crowd like a pack of hungry wolves leaping among a flock of sheep. The crowd was in an uproar as they rushed out recklessly. The great Xia army was facing a severe test. Di Qing frowned and couldn't wait any longer. He turned to Lu Bu and said, "General, please take action and get rid of this scourge." Di Qing looked at the Somali Imperial Guards galloping in the crowd with disgust. Those who didn't care about the lives of the people were not fit to be soldiers. "Watch me." Lu Bu couldn't stand it any longer. He rode his horse to the front and nocked an arrow. Whether it was the Romance of the Three Kingdoms or the biography of Lu Bu, there were records of Lu Bu's halberd shooting. It could be seen that Lu Bu's archery was at the top level in the Three Kingdoms. Amidst the chaotic crowd, the Somali Imperial Guards were like fireflies in the dark, extremely eye-catching. Lu Bu casually shot an arrow, but with a whoosh, it hit a person, causing him to fall off his horse. Then there was another whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Numerous arrows were shot without missing their target. The other soldiers who were proficient in archery saw this and drew their bows and arrows to snipe the enemy. Every arrow shot hit one person, and there were no casualties. It was truly shocking. The Dragonblood cavalry had many hidden experts. At this critical juncture, they wouldn't dare to make a fool of themselves if they didn't have some skills. There were only about 100 Somali Imperial Guards, and they were all annihilated in less than 10 minutes. In order to prevent the horses from running amok, they were all shot dead on the spot. It had to be said that Lu Bu's move was indeed beautiful. However, the crowd was already frightened. Ever since they left the city gate, unforeseen events kept happening. The ordinary people didn't have a strong heart and were like headless flies, scurrying around. Di Qing had a headache when he saw this. What the F***ck is this? Di Qing couldn't help but curse. No matter how the people ran amok, they couldn't pose any substantial threat to the Great Xia army. If it was a life-and-death situation, Di Qing wouldn't hesitate to wield the butcher's knife. Even those mutants who were sneak attacking from the rear were nothing more than a minor ailment. Why did the Somali royal family put in so much effort and disregarded the hearts of the people? Was it just to annoy the Great Xia army? Soon, the Somali king gave an answer. The Somali coalition forces that had been holding back finally made a big move. Close to noon, the south and north city gates of Mount Magoo opened at the same time. The 80,000 Imperial Guards, 50,000 territorial soldiers, and more than 90,000 mutant soldiers rushed out of the city gates and attacked the flanks of the Great Xia army. The two wings of Great Xia had no more than 20,000 people. Faced with an enemy that was 5 to 6 times their size, they were immediately at a disadvantage. Although the Dragonblood cavalry were elites, the Somali infantry division was not up to par. In less than an hour, they were routed. The Somali army had only been reorganized for a short period of time, and it was still all right when they were in a favorable situation, but once they were in a disadvantageous situation, the soldiers would lose their vigor and tenacity, and very quickly, they would show signs of fatigue, and their lines would be broken by the enemy. The Dragonblood cavalry was outnumbered, and they were quickly surrounded. At this point in time, the Somali king's true motive was finally revealed. He wanted to take the opportunity of the commoners leaving the city to trap the Great Xia army in a sea of people and tie up the army's hands and feet. This way, the Somali coalition forces would be able to free up their hands to deal with Great Xia's flank. The Great Xia army's flanks were ambushed by the Somali coalition forces and were surrounded by perils. Looking at the situation, this Somali war actually ushered in an unprecedented reversal. This made the war reporters outside the city extremely excited, and they immediately sent the frontline battle reports back to the country. Once the news came out, the world was in an uproar. Somalia appeared on the headlines of the global media in such a manner. Many people were unhappy with Great Xia's strength, and after this setback, many people wanted to see Great Xia as a joke. Great Xia's military strength is destined to not have a good ending. The arrogant will eventually fall. Great Xia? Great Xia is about to fall. Similar mockery could be heard incessantly. Feudal lords, adventurer players, enemies of Great Xia, envious people, and all kinds of people jumped out one by one to humiliate Great Xia. Even within the China region, there was no lack of cynical mockery. It was really rare to see Great Xia as a joke. In an instant, it seemed that Great Xia had fallen from a high and mighty overlord. Caesar, the feudal lord of the Mediterranean Sea, even publicly announced that Great Xia's military strength had caused unrest in the Mediterranean Sea and its surrounding areas, and that today's defeat was retribution. Shanghai City, Xia Palace. In the Imperial Study, Military Affairs Minister Du Ruhui, Imperial Guard Commander Hua Tsubing, Senior Scholar Jia Su, and the others were all there to discuss the war in Somalia. Although the outside world was full of mockery and lively, the Imperial Study was very quiet, and there was no sign of panic. Those who were making sarcastic remarks were short-sighted people. With the foundation of the Great Xia dynasty, even if Di Qing's tribe was defeated, Somalia wouldn't be able to reverse its fate of destruction. This was because Great Xia had an army, and if one expedition wasn't enough, they would do it twice. I suggest that we immediately dispatch the 2nd Legion of the Imperial Guards to reinforce Somalia. The one who spoke was Duruhue. Oyengshu rubbed his forehead and said, Friendship City is more than 1,000 miles away from Megu City. Even with the speed of the Imperial Guards, it will take them at least 4 days to arrive. I'm afraid that distant water can't quench the present thirst. Duruhue and the others fell silent. This was the drawback of an overseas expedition. Don't care about the clamor in the outside world. The court still has to trust Di Qing and the frontline soldiers. Oyengshua's gaze was calm, and his attitude was firm. The Somali coalition's attack this time may have caught us off guard, but we will no longer be cowards. As the saying goes, crisis is opportunity. Let's see how Di Qing operate. Oyengshu didn't believe that a Somali strategy could defeat a famous general like Di Qing. He also didn't believe that the Somali coalition could really destroy a trump card like the Dragonblood cavalry. Your Majesty is wise. Jia Su didn't hide his admiration and said with a smile, the Somali coalition seems to have the upper hand, but this advantage is only on the surface. It's not enough to determine the outcome of the war. Oyengshua's eyes lit up, and he said with a smile, you must have a brilliant plan? Duruhue and Hua Tsubing also looked at Jia Su. This senior scholar was a top-notch strategist, and he had come up with many ingenious plans ever since he came to the dynasty. Jia Su didn't decline modestly and said, the Somali royal family has taken everything into consideration, but they missed out on an existence. You mean the Atlantic Fleet? Duruhue finally understood. Jia Su nodded and said, the Atlantic Fleet is equipped with firearms and shield troops. They can go ashore to assist in the battle and relieve the flank. More importantly, the fleet is equipped with flying squadrons and marine troops. Now that the Somali coalition is out in full force, the interior of the royal city is very empty, and the defense is weak. The Bones of Woodbine is facing the sea, and the king only needs to give the order for Alvaro to send marine troops to infiltrate the city, and then have the flying squadrons cover from the air. They can charge into the palace, destroy the stone tablet, and complete the occupation of the royal city. That way, the situation will be set. Duruhue and the others' eyes lit up, and they immediately relaxed. This is a brilliant plan. Duruhue was full of praise. If we take down the Bones of Woodbine, the Somali mutants will immediately be teleported away, and the Somali coalition will lose an arm. More importantly, we can use the teleportation array in the royal city to directly send the royal guards to the battlefield, and the Somali coalition won't be able to do anything. Jia Su's eyes were as sharp as ever. Oyengshu also smiled and said, since the formation of the marine troops, they also need a tough battle to prove their combat power. We'll act according to this plan. Yes, sir. Commander Hua, have the Rock Army be on standby, Oyengshu ordered. There were already enough cavalry on the battlefield in Somalia, and the Rock Army was more suitable to stabilize the situation. Understood. Hua Tsubing nodded. Not long after the meeting ended, Alvaro received a battle order from the Grand Council. Alvaro had been worrying about the current state of the battle, but after reading the order, his expression relaxed and his heart calmed down. He shouted, "Men! Raise the tent!" Yes, sir. The battle was urgent, and Alvaro quickly arranged the battle plan. In less than half an hour, the Atlantic Fleet quietly docked, and teams of musketeers and shield troops went ashore. Under the leadership of the general, they gathered on the coast. The battle outside the city was intense, but no one noticed the abnormality of the Atlantic Fleet. During the previous round of restructuring of the Navy, Oyengshu had already noticed the weakness of the Navy's close combat ability. Now, the Navy had greatly reduced the number of archers and switched to sword and shield troops with divine crossbows. As the Spanish god of war, Alvaro was not only good at sea battles, but he was also familiar with land battles. He knew that the Navy was not used to fighting on land, so he gave up on the risky method of supporting both flanks at the same time, and instead concentrated his forces in one place to support the southern troops first. It had to be said that this small detail showed Alvaro's military accomplishment. The commander of the southern troops was the veteran General Mating, who was very experienced and stronger than the northern troops. With the support of the fleet, they would definitely be able to escape and counterattack the enemy. As long as they broke through one of the routes, the Somali Allied forces would have lost 50% of the battle. In addition, Alvaro also thought that if the planned operation of the Marine Special Forces was thwarted, they could save Mating's troops in time and take advantage of the situation to enter the city to complete the unfinished business of the Marine troops. On the contrary, if they chose to support the northern troops, they might be trapped before they could escape. If that happened, they would lose everything, and there would be no chance for them to turn the tables. To be able to make such a clear judgment in such a tense battlefield was a test of the standard of a general. Just as the Atlantic fleet landed, the Marine troops had already set off. They followed the estuary of the river that flowed through Bonewood City and sneaked into the city, heading straight for the palace. In order to defeat the two flanks of Great Siah, the king of Somalia staked everything on one throw. Other than the 2,000 imperial guards stationed in the palace, there were no other guards in the city. At the same time, the flying squadron took off and targeted the palace. Chapter 920. The wooden bones were all tied up. The palace. The Somali king sat leisurely in the main hall, waiting for the news of victory. A body only provided the idea of using the civilians as bait, but the Somali king evolved it into a sophisticated tactical arrangement and successfully achieved a great reversal. Just last night, the mysterious man contacted the Somali king again and promised that as long as Somalia repelled the first wave of Great Siah's expeditionary forces, they would act decisively to stop Great Siah from conquering Somalia again. Precisely because of this, the Somali king never thought of escaping. His plan was flawless, and there was no possibility of failure. The Somali king was secretly excited at the thought of the supreme glory that defeating the Great Siah expeditionary forces would bring him. As for the civilian casualties, who would blame them in the face of such a huge victory? At most, the kingdom would grant them the status of martyrs, and that would be enough to quell the unrest. When that time came, he, the king of Somalia, would have supreme glory and power. The Somali king almost laughed at the thought of this. What a wonderful moment! At around 1 p.m. in the afternoon, the battle on the north and south sides of the city had reached a white-hot stage. The Somali infantry division on both sides was almost crippled, and only the Dragonblood cavalry was still struggling. Especially in the south, the Dragonblood cavalry, under the leadership of the veteran General Mating, constantly roamed around the Somali coalition forces, not giving the enemy a chance to divide and surround them. The Dragonblood cavalry was worthy of the name of Great Siah's trump card. Fortunately, the coalition forces had the advantage in numbers. Although they were unable to defeat the Dragonblood cavalry, they were unable to escape and go to the center of the army. The battle seemed to be in a stalemate. At this moment, Alvaro personally led the 20,000 Navy troops to the outer circle of the battlefield. As soon as they arrived, the musketeers fired 3 volleys, causing great damage to the coalition forces. This was the classic shooting tactic of matchlocks, similar to the crossbow tactics of the cold weapon era. Because muskets could not fire continuously, and the speed of reloading was very slow, it was necessary to increase the shooting efficiency. This kind of damage was more important than the psychological impact. Firstly, the coalition forces never dreamed that Great Siah would have reinforcements at this time. They subconsciously thought that the Great Siah army had escaped and were scared out of their wit. When they took a closer look, they realized that it was the Great Siah navy. Secondly, this was the first time that Great Xia had deployed the musketeers on land. Facing the ferocious firearms, the Somali indigenous army panicked. Without a doubt, the arrival of the Great Xia Navy had completely disrupted the rhythm of the Somali coalition forces. The besieged Mating's troops were even more shocked. They cooperated with the foreign troops and launched an even more intense attack on the Allied forces. "Boys, let's show these barbarians the might of the Dragon Blood Cavalry." As a veteran general of the Three Kingdoms, Mating was used to calling people other than the Han barbarians, which made people feel helpless. Kill, kill, kill. The Dragon Blood Cavalry was a group of killing gods, and they had never felt so stifled before. They had long since wanted to fight to their heart's content. Receiving the order, they immediately launched an even more ferocious charge at the Allied army. Only the Imperial Guards were capable of launching a cavalry charge within the enemy's formation. For a time, the Somali coalition forces in the south fell into a predicament of being attacked from both inside and outside, and their advantage was gone. If they were to divert their forces to extinguish the Great Xia Navy on the periphery, they might be bitten by the Dragonblood Cavalry. If they focused on surrounding the Dragonblood Cavalry, the Great Xia Navy would be able to crush them from the outside. This is really bad. The battle situation in the south was turning in favor of the Great Xia army. At the same time, the central army of Great Xia also made a move. Di Qing was indeed a famous general. Although he was panicking, he didn't panic. He ordered the central army to split into two and move towards the north and south respectively, leaving the central area empty for the commoners to pass through. It was equivalent to combining the 6 checkpoints to form a huge spillway. As a result, the surging crowd surged towards the rear of the army like a tide, reducing the chaos at the scene. At the same time, Di Qing ordered the mutants among the commoners to be dealt with firmly so that they wouldn't have another chance to cause chaos. Even if there were occasional accidental injuries, it wouldn't matter. In addition to solving the problem of the commoners, Di Qing was more concerned about the battle situation in the north and south. The 3 divisions of the Dragonblood Cavalry stationed in the Central Army received the order, and under the leadership of Lu Bu, they quietly gathered at the north and south sides. The order that Di Qing gave to Lu Bu wasn't for the Dragonblood Cavalry to immediately enter the battlefield between the north and south. Instead, he wanted them to cut through the north and south gates and completely seal off the retreat of the Somali coalition forces. As long as the coalition forces were trapped outside the city, Great Xia would definitely win this battle. Lu Bu received the order and led his troops to take a detour to the 2 flanks. The Somali king's evil plan was being dismembered bit by Di Qing. The Somali king was still unaware of this and was daydreaming in the palace. In an alley not far from the palace, the Marine Corps had already quietly assembled. They were waiting for the aerial squadron to complete the bombing of the palace in order to divert the attention of the Imperial Guards. The Atlantic Fleet's Marine Corps currently only had 1 brigade, and more than half of the members were left at the headquarters in Morocco. There were only about 1,000 people accompanying the 4th and 5th formations. It wasn't easy to break through the palace guarded by 2,000 Imperial Guards. Fortunately, they had the aerial squadron's cooperation. Just as Alvaro led the navy to support Mating's troops, the aerial squadron had already quietly arrived above the palace. For the aerial squadron, this was also an unusual mission. This was the first time that Great Xia had carried out a targeted bombing, which was very different from the previous random bombing. The aerial squadron's mission was to disperse the Imperial Guards as much as possible, preferably causing some casualties. Boom, boom, boom. In order to mobilize the Imperial Guards, the first round of bombing was concentrated in the main hall of the palace. What's that? The Imperial Guards didn't understand. Oh no, the palace is on fire! Quick, His Majesty is still in the palace. The Imperial Guards were alarmed and gathered in the main hall from all the sentries in the palace. The Somali king was in the midst of a beautiful dream when he was suddenly frightened by the bombing and fell from his throne to the ground. His face was pale as he asked in horror, "What happened?" The imperial guards guarding outside the door rushed into the main hall and said, "Your Majesty, there are monsters attacking from the sky. Your Majesty, please move immediately." Flying monsters? The Somali king didn't understand. Quick, retreat. The Somali king was looking forward to a big victory and didn't want to lose his life at this time. Under the protection of the imperial guards, the Somali king quietly moved to a basement of the palace to hide. The Somali king, who was hiding in the basement, felt a trace of uneasiness for the first time. Where did these monsters come from? The Somali king didn't dare to think further. There seemed to be an unexpected change on the battlefield. The imperial guards who rushed over after hearing the news were busy putting out the fire in the main hall, which was exactly what the aerial squadron wanted. Instead of throwing incendiary bombs on the roof of the main hall, the aerial squadron threw bombs into the dense crowd of imperial guards. Boom! 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 The Somali imperial guards had never seen this before. They were bombed and fled like rats, suffering heavy losses. Howl! At this moment, the roar of a leopard could be heard from the depths of the palace. This leopard was none other than Somalia's guardian beast, the African black-spotted golden leopard. The divine beast had finally awakened after the attack on the palace. This golden leopard was as tall as a human and nearly 4 meters long. It was 3 to 4 times the size of an ordinary adult leopard. Its body was well proportioned, and its golden fur was covered with black spots. It looked very noble. The spots on its head were small and dense, while the spots on its back were dense and larger. Howl! The golden leopard in the distance opened its bloody mouth and spat out a white light bullet. With lightning speed, it hit a mimicry aircraft and exploded in the air. The aircraft was destroyed and the pilot was killed. This level of power was truly terrifying. Good! The imperial guards clapped and cheered. Their morale was greatly boosted. The squadron leader of the aerial squadron came from the flight training base outside Shanghai City. He was one of the first batch of pilots in Great Xia and was very experienced. Although he had suffered a setback, he didn't panic and ordered through the communication comm. "Send 3 aircraft to lure the golden leopard away." "Yes, sir." Without the squadron leader's instructions, 3 mimicry aircraft separated from the squadron and formed a triangular formation. They flew toward the golden leopard, ready to avenge their comrades. The golden leopard was a divine beast, and the white light bullet was its ultimate technique. However, it couldn't be used frequently. Furthermore, the aerial squadron was prepared and wouldn't be hit so easily. However, a divine beast was still a divine beast. In the process of approaching, another mimicry aircraft was shot down. Blast this beast to death! The eyes of the 2 surviving pilots were bloodshot as they dropped bombs on the golden leopard's head. One of the bombs happened to explode on the back of the golden leopard, causing flesh and blood to splatter everywhere. The golden leopard was a divine beast after all. It had thick skin and coarse flesh. If it was an ordinary person, a powerful bomb would be enough to send them to hell. However, to the golden leopard, it was merely a superficial wound. One of the young pilots saw that the golden leopard was still majestic and wanted to drop another bomb. Fortunately, his teammate was calmer and said, "Completing the mission is more important." Yes. The young pilot immediately came to his senses. The most important thing at the moment was to lure this beast away and not to be angry with it. The 2 aircraft rotated in a spiral pattern and flew toward the depths of the palace. As they flew, they dropped incendiary bombs one after another, burning down the palace. Sure enough, the golden leopard chased after them and fired another 2 light bullets. Unfortunately, they all missed. The golden leopard was a divine beast and had long since gained intelligence. Seeing that it couldn't do anything to the 2 big birds, it was extremely angry. It took a deep breath and suddenly opened its bloody mouth to spit out a light bullet that was more than twice the size of the previous one. What was even more strange was that this light bullet was not only extremely fast, but it could also track and turn in the air. It was as if the golden leopard was controlling it from afar. It was truly mystical. This time, the aircraft couldn't escape. Boom! The young pilot and his aircraft exploded in the air. The aftermath of the explosion blew the other aircraft to the side, almost causing it to crash. Most importantly, the aircraft's wing was severely damaged and wouldn't be able to fly far. Killing two birds with one stone. The golden leopard was indeed smart and also very vengeful. The one who had thrown the bomb on its back was the young pilot. He didn't want to be remembered by the golden leopard and became a priority target. Chapter 9:21. The surviving aircraft wobbled and flew for less than a kilometer before its wings caught fire. It had to land on a square in the depths of the palace, but it also lost its combat effectiveness. In less than a quarter of an hour, Golden Leopard destroyed 3 aircraft. It was truly brave and worthy of the title of Divine Beast. The Marines outside the palace were shocked to see the aircraft being destroyed one after another. The Atlantic fleet sailed from Morocco to Somalia and encountered many giant sea beasts along the way. Those giant beasts were more than 10 times larger than Golden Leopard, but they didn't have such magical means. "General, what should we do now?" the adjutant asked. The general gritted his teeth and said, "We can't care so much. Kill our way in." The Marines could be exposed at any time if they stayed outside the palace. Although the divine beast was strong, they could only take the risk. Yes. The Marines received the order and rushed to the palace gate without fear. They quickly took care of the palace guards and forced their way into the palace. They didn't stop and went straight to the main hall of the palace. They encountered sporadic guards on the way and naturally killed them one by one. When they arrived at the main hall, the battle really began. The flying squadron had already shifted their target to Golden Leopard, leaving this place to the Marines. "How dare you trespass into the palace?" Although the Somali Imperial Guards were covered in dust from the explosion, they were the elites of the Imperial Guards since they were left behind by the king to guard the palace. Fire! The Marines didn't want to waste time with these people. Before they even came into contact, they fired a volley of arrows. The divine crossbow's power was extraordinary and took down more than 200 people. Kill! Putting away the divine crossbow, the Marines rushed over with their swords. The Marines were all trained in the Special Operations Base and were proficient in all kinds of weapons and special operations. Their combat power was comparable to the Royal Guards and stronger than the General Field Army. Therefore, although it was 1 against 2, the Marines were still brave and had the upper hand. The Marines knew that the flying squadron was using their lives to delay Golden Leopard and buy time for them. At a time like this, there was no room for nonsense, and they immediately entered the most intense battle. On the white square outside the main hall, blood flowed everywhere as red and white collided. The white-hot battle that took place at the entrance of the main hall lasted for nearly an hour. Both sides used all their strength to kill each other. After sacrificing more than half of the Somali Imperial Guards, their mentality finally collapsed completely. They were no longer willing to face the Marines as they fled. The Marine Corps wasn't any better. Out of 1,000 men, only 300 were left. If it weren't for the fact that the Marines had gone through hellish training in the Special Operations Training Base and were extremely resilient and courageous, they would have collapsed before the Somali Royal Guard. We finally won. However, there wasn't much joy on the face of the victor. Instead, there was a bitter expression on his face. It was for no other reason than because of a loud roar that came from nearby. Roar, 1 hour. In just 1 hour, the squadron was crippled by the Golden Leopard and forced to return. Riddled with scars and badly mutilated, the Golden Leopard was like a god of war as it slowly and firmly made its way to the main hall of the palace. It was determined to protect the kingdom and fulfill its duty as the guardian beast of the kingdom. Can the wounded Marines still deal with this mythological beast? The surviving members of the Marine Corps were nervous and didn't have much confidence. Even so, they had to fight because they were also responsible and shouldering a mission. Brothers, get ready to fight. The commander of the Marine Corps wiped the blood off his face and grinned. I knew it wasn't a good thing. The members of the Marine Corps gritted their teeth, and almost all of them were wounded. Their mouths were unscrupulously complaining, but the hand holding the sword remained motionless. Roar! The golden leopard finally came to the front of the hall. There was a line of blood along the way. It could be seen that under the bombardment of the squadron, this mythological beast was also seriously injured. If it wasn't for the strong physique of the mythological beast, it would have already died. Kill! The Marines surrounded the golden leopard and tried to kill the mythological beast with human wave tactic. The golden leopard looked slightly dispirited and could no longer shoot light bullet. It could only face the enemy with its physical strength. He was as tall as a person and had a robust body that was 4 meters long. His body contained enormous strength and astonishing explosive power. In a one-on-one fight, no member of the Marine Corps was the opponent of the golden leopard. During this period, the commander of the Marine Corps wanted to secretly send a small team into the hall to break the stone tablet. He didn't expect the golden leopard to be so magical, and its eyes were so sharp that no one could escape its eyes. Seeing someone enter the hall, it became anxious and swung its tail like an iron whip, repelling the enemy. It then jumped into the hall, wanting to stop the Marines from destroying the stone tablet. The commander of the Marine Corps shook his head and led his troops into the hall. The battlefield moved from outside to inside the hall, making it even more difficult for the Marines to fight, and their losses increased. This was the so-called trying to steal a chicken only to lose the rice used to lure it. The two sides fought for another 20 minutes, and the golden leopard was still as brave as ever. However, the Marines' physical strength was exhausted, and their counterattack was getting weaker and weaker. The commander of the Marine Corps was anxious. If they failed, he really didn't know how to explain it to the commander. At this time, a loud shout came from outside the hall, "Evil beast, don't be so arrogant." He turned around and saw a group of people wearing radiant armor coming in. It was the Dragonblood cavalry led by Ma Ting. The Marines were overjoyed when they saw it. This time they were foolproof. Meanwhile, in the southern suburbs, Ma Ting's troops finally defeated the Somali coalition with the help of the Atlantic Fleet. During the battle, Alvaro could faintly hear roars coming from the city. He also learned that the pilots had suffered heavy losses and knew that something must have happened in the palace. After meeting up with Ma Ting, Alvaro told him his worries. When Ma Ting heard that, he immediately handed the troops over to Alvaro to continue suppressing the Somali coalition while he led 1,000 Dragonblood cavalry into the city. This time, Alvaro led his troops to rescue them. No matter who said it was a military order, it was a great favor to Ma Ting's troops. Ma Ting had to repay this favor. After rushing, they finally managed to save the Marines at the last moment. There was no more suspense in the battle after that. The Dragonblood cavalry blocked the Golden Leopard's attack while the Marines worked together to destroy the stone tablet. The moment the stone tablet was destroyed, the Golden Leopard stopped fighting. What was even more miraculous was that the Golden Leopard's injuries had all recovered, and it became a majestic divine beast again. Ma Ting and company were alarmed, thinking that another battle was about to happen. Unexpectedly, the Golden Leopard only glanced at them and walked into the depths of the palace. It had already changed owners and became the guardian divine beast of Great Xia. When Ma Ting and company saw this, they heaved a sigh of relief. They really did not wish to fight such a ferocious beast again. "Lock down the palace and find the king," Ma Ting ordered. As the culprit of this battle, Ma Ting would definitely not let the Somali king off. "Yes, sir." The Dragonblood cavalry scattered in all directions. The king hiding in the basement would probably not be able to escape. At the same time, a system announcement sounded. World announcement. Congratulations to the China server's player. Don't say you have clothes for conquering Somalia. The news has spread far and wide, and the merit is unparalleled. Special reward of 100,000 merit points and 200,000 reputation points as encouragement. Congratulations to the player. The battle in Somalia had added another 150,000 merit points to Ouyang Shua. However, Ouyang Shua's noble rank was already the highest. Before Gaia released the next noble rank, Ouyang Shua did not know how many merit points he needed to accumulate before he could be promoted again. Gaia probably did not expect that a freak like Ouyang Shua would be born in the game. In just 4 years of Gaia, his merit points had exceeded the 2 million mark. In his previous life, no one had achieved this in Gaia's 5 years. What an anomaly! In the distant Sky City, Gaia muttered to himself. World announcement. Congratulations to the China server's player. Don't say you have clothes for conquering Somalia. He has become the 3rd feudal lord in the world to complete the country annihilation achievement. 1,000,000 gold coins as encouragement. Congratulations to the player. It was indeed Gaia's style. The lower the ranking, the lower the reward. The 2nd place would receive a special reward, but the 3rd place would only be left with 1,000,000 gold coins as consolation. Thankfully, with this money, the reconstruction of Somalia would not require the imperial court to allocate funds. World announcement. Somalia has been annihilated. All Somali players' levels, skills, cultivation techniques, and all other in-game achievements will be reset to 0. At the same time, they will be collectively teleported to sealed grounds, as punishment. When the first system announcement sounded, the faces of the Somali players who were still fighting turned ashen. Regardless of whether the Somali king could escape the calamity, the fate of the players was already set in stone. As soon as the announcement was made, they turned into streaks of light and left, leaving the battlefield empty. Seeing the mutants disappear on the spot, the Somali Imperial Guards and Territorial Army that were still fighting seemed to know what had happened. They lost their fighting spirit and left the battlefield one by one. This war had finally come to an end. Although there were many twists and turns in the process, fortunately, Great Xia had once again conquered a country and defended its honor. Those who had mocked Great Xia shut their mouths when they received the news. Their faces were filled with embarrassment. This slap to the face was too quick and painful, catching them off guard. This is so embarrassing. World announcement. China server's player Don't Say You Have Clothes has led his troops to victory in the country war. China server has obtained 10 national honor points. At the same time, all players in China server will be rewarded with an innate attribute +1 as encouragement. Congratulations to China server. Once the announcement was made, the China server became very lively. Previously, when the Somali alliance attacked, although most of the players in the China server were still cheering for the Great Xia dynasty, there was no lack of cynical mockery. When the Great Xia dynasty once again won glory for their country and won precious national honor points, those who mocked them wanted to hide in the dark and never show their faces again. This was because once they were seen, the first thing they would say would be, "Weren't you mocking Great Xia? How can you still have the face to enjoy the attribute rewards from Great Xia? If it were me, I would have committed suicide long ago." That's right, we don't need to accept handouts. Haha, the mockery of the players was equally unrestrained. Chapter 922. The moment Somalia was annihilated, the entire world was stunned. On the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, Jack stood at the top of the walls of Liberty City and looked into the distance. He was speechless for a long time. How he wished that the territory with such deterrence and dominance was Liberty City. Soon, Jack muttered to himself, his eyes gleaming with ambition. Liberty City had successfully been promoted to a capital city. Soon, the world's second dynasty would be born here. The establishment of the nation was the beginning of Liberty City's global hegemony. The war between nations would no longer be a one-man show for the great Xia dynasty. Apart from Jack, William, Pushkin, Dillawa, Keisuke Honda, Park Shinji, Henry, and many other ambitious lords were stimulated by the great Xia dynasty. On a global scale, many ambitious feudal lords were stimulated by the Grand Xia dynasty, and all of them sped up the pace of becoming duke. They were not willing to let Ouyang Shuo act alone. There should be a place for them on the global stage. As Gaia's 5th year approached, an even more magnificent era was quietly approaching. The lords who missed this opportunity would lose the chance to compete on the global stage and gradually become a supporting character. At the same time, the great Xia dynasty would face even more difficult opponent. Gaia's 4th year, August 5th, Somalia. Ouyang Shuo led the 3,000 divine guards to Magu town. Yesterday, the cleanup of the Somali war was carried out exceptionally smoothly. They didn't even use the monolith army. The 6 lords were teleported away, leaving the territorial army without a leader, and they surrendered one by one. As the Somali king was dragged out of the basement by the Dragonblood cavalry, the hesitant Somali imperial guards also surrendered, and the Somali coalition army officially disbanded. The war ended and the unrest subsided. The restlessness of the people in the capital gradually calmed down, and they returned to their homes to prepare to welcome their new lord. Di Qing ordered the opening of the granary and distributed all the food that had been collected to the people. Looking at the mountain of flour in the granary, the last shred of hope the people had for the king vanished. Too vicious. They actually let us starve with so much food. Their intentions are reprehensible. The indignant crowd clamored for the Somali king to be hanged. Di Qing naturally wouldn't fulfill their wishes. Only the king had the final say on how to deal with the Somali king. The Somali king's actions gave the great Xia a lot of time to appease the people of Somalia. Accompanying Ouyang Shuo were the Director of Discipline of the Bureau of Military Affairs, Gao Shun, and the former county governor of Xing Province, Pei Ju. The reason why it was called before was because Pei Ju had already received a new assignment before he left. The imperial court decreed the establishment of the Somaliland province, with 4 prefectures under its jurisdiction. Pei Ju, the county governor of Star Province, was appointed as the governor of Somaliland Province, while Gu Xiuwen, the city governor of Friendship City, was transferred to the county governor of Star Province. Pei Ju had been in charge of Xingzhou County for 1 year and 3 months. He had firmly held the Strait of Malacca for Great Xia, greatly promoting the prosperity of Xingzhou County's trade, and also balancing the relationship with the neighboring ASEAN countries. The strategic location and surrounding environment of Somaliland Province and Star State County were almost the same. The only difference was that the territory of Somaliland Province was much larger, and they had to face more enemies. The situation was more complicated. Therefore, Pei Ju's transfer to be the governor of the Somaliland Province could be said to be a matter of course. Gu Xiuwen was the same. From the earliest days of Beihai Village to Beihai City, and then to Friendship City, Gu Xiuwen had always been in charge of the coastal cities. He believed that he would do just as well in Star State County. Ouyang Shuo had always thought highly of this young and former official. As for Gao Shun's arrival in Magu City, he was in charge of the reorganization of the army. Gao Shun trained the soldiers well. Ever since he took office, he had almost completely remodeled the dynasty's reserves and guards. Unfortunately, because Friendship City was isolated from the sea, Gao Shun had not had the time to rebuild the city's guards. It was precisely because of this that the Friendship City's guards performed badly during the pirate attack. Ouyang Shuo was so disappointed that he even removed his position as the commander of the guards. Gao Shun was also one of Du Ruhui's main assistants during the previous reorganization of the imperial court's army. This reorganization of the Somali prisoners of war was the first time Gao Shun took on such a heavy responsibility. This showed that Gao Shun, this special general, was deeply trusted by Emperor Xia Ouyang Shu. There were 3 reasons for Ouyang Shua's action. First, the number of Somali prisoners of war was relatively small. According to Di Qing's preliminary statistics, the war in Somalia had a total of 120,000 prisoners of war. Among them, there were 15,000 local prisoners of war, 65,000 imperial guards of the capital, and 35,000 soldiers of the capital's territory. Compared to the nearly 300,000 prisoners of war in Morocco, the number was indeed much smaller. This was mainly related to the fact that Somalia was sparsely populated and not a tactical problem. In the war in Somalia, other than the last 2 flanks, there were almost no fierce battles. Therefore, the losses on both sides were relatively small, and it was within a controllable range. Out of the 120,000 prisoners of war, excluding the seriously injured and unqualified soldiers, as well as the replenishment from the Somali Corps, the Atlantic Fleet, and the Dragon Blood Cavalry, there were only about 80,000 that could be reorganized. After careful selection, it was enough to reorganize a field army. If the 4 counties of Somaliland were to set up a guard division according to the imperial court's usual practice, there would not be many people left, and it would be equivalent to fighting a war for nothing. This was the second reason why Ouyang Shua chose Gao Shun to be in charge of this round of army reorganization. After some consideration, Ouyang Shua came up with a bold idea. Other than the Somali Corps, there would not be any local guard division, and the province's defense would be given to the Corps. The benefits of this were obvious. The biggest benefit was that the number of soldiers had been reduced by nearly half, greatly reducing the financial burden of the imperial court and the local governments, and not letting their finances be dragged down by military expenses. Somaliland had a population of less than 2 million. If they set up 4 guard divisions and added the Somali Corps, it would be equivalent to feeding an army of 1.54 million. For a province that was already underdeveloped, the burden was truly too heavy. The only problem he had to solve was, could the Somali army replace the garrison division? After some consideration, Ouyang Shua answered, yes. From the day the Somali Corps was set up, its name separated it from the other armies like the Dragon Stallion Army. It belonged to a special group, and it was destined to take root in Somaliland. Unless it was absolutely necessary, the imperial court would not easily mobilize the Somali Corps to fight. This also meant that the Somali Corps would be stationed in the province all year round, unlike the Dragon Stallion Army, who could go on expeditions at any time. Since that was the case, the role of the Guard Division would be greatly reduced, and there would be no need for it to exist. With a standing army stationed here, what was the point of having a Guard Division? There would be too many redundancies, and it would be enough for the counties of Somaliland to just prepare their reserves. Duruhue and the others immediately nodded in agreement to Ouyang Shua's suggestion. Just like that, the matter was settled. As for Morocco Province, which was similar to Somaliland Province, the 4 guard divisions that had already been set up in the province would not be disbanded, and the status quo would be maintained for the time being. On one hand, Morocco Province had a large population, and the pressure to support the Guard Division would not be as great as in Somaliland Province. On the other hand, neighboring Algeria was supporting Morocco to form a kingdom in exile, which was also a scourge. On the day that the Grand Xia dynasty and Algérie met on the battlefield, the 4 guard divisions in Morocco Province would be able to quickly reorganize and form a field army to fight alongside the Morocco Corps. In addition, Ouyang Shua also planned to reform the guard divisions of the other provinces. Ouyang Shua did not intend to disband the guard divisions of all the counties at once, as that would be too impatient. It would be best to start with the counties inland. These counties had no hidden dangers of war, and their defensive responsibilities were relatively light. The guard divisions could be reduced to guard brigades in order to reduce military expenditures. The guard divisions would still be kept at the border, ready to reinforce the front lines at any time. Ouyang Shua left the specific implementation to Gao Shun, and had the training bureau come up with a detailed plan. The third reason why Ouyang Shua appointed Gao Shun to be in charge of this round of army reorganization was that he hoped that the training bureau led by Gao Shun would be able to play a more prominent role in the future army reorganization. It could even be said that the training bureau would be responsible for the future reorganization of the army. The field army that would be reorganized would be replaced by the Dragon Stallion Army, the Stalwart Tiger Army, and the Hidden Leopard Army. The elite Soldier Kings would then be used to form the 4th Imperial Guard Legion. The war in Somalia had exposed another flaw in the Imperial Guard Legion. Previously, the Imperial Guard Legion only had one infantry legion to trap the Monolith Army in Royal City, and there was no rotation of troops. This time, arranging for the Dragonblood Cavalry to assist the Somaliland Corps in attacking Somalia revealed that a pure cavalry legion lacked flexibility in expeditions and was very limited in terms of tactical arrangements. As such, the 4th Imperial Guard Legion would be a mixed infantry and cavalry legion. It would also be equipped with musketeers and flying squads, becoming the first highly integrated mixed legion in the entire army. As for the choice of legion commander, Ouyang Shua had not made up his mind yet. In the current Great Xia army, the only generals who had not assumed the position of legion commander were Chao Chun, Ma Ting, Xiahou Yuan, Chao Qi, Wei Zhang, and Zhang He. Among them, Chao Qi and Wei Zhang were the deputy legion commanders of the 1st Legion, which was equivalent to legion commanders. As such, they were not included in the list of candidates. Looking at it this way, there were only 4 generals from the 3 countries left. The Great Xia army was filled with talented generals, but the scale of the army was also far greater than that of the other territories. It was more than 10 times or even 20 to 30 times the size of the other territories. After these few rounds of army expansion, the reserve of generals in the army was almost exhausted. In addition, they had gained nothing from the Battle of Yishui, and other than Hua Mulan, no other generals joined the army after the war. A field army with 70,000 regular soldiers would be a powerful force in any dynasty or generation. Ouyang Shua naturally had to hand it over to a capable general. The commander of the Imperial Guard Legion had to be even more convincing. If he were to appoint an ordinary general, not only the Imperial Guard Legion, but even the soldiers from the Stalwart Tiger Army and the Stalwart Dragon Army would also have objections. This was because in the eyes of the Great Xia soldiers, the Imperial Guard Legion represented the trump card. Chapter 923. Since the Imperial Guards were the trump card, the position of commander would naturally be held by the trump card of the entire army. Ma Chao and Lu Bu, these 2 peerless generals, were very convincing to the soldiers. Among the 4 generals, Chao Chun, Ma Ting, Xiahou Ying, and Zhang He, only Chao Chun was slightly more suitable. Ouyang Shua was not in a hurry to make a decision. After all, the reorganization of the army would take at least 1.5 months. There might be some surprises during this period. Wooden Bones Bund Royal Palace. Ouyang Shua had no intention of transforming the Somali royal palace into another palace. According to the plan, the palace complex would be completely demolished and a provincial governor's office would be built on the original site. There was a prison in the southwest corner of the palace. It was used by the former king to imprison special criminals. Ouyang Shua appeared in Wooden Bones Bund and carried out the usual welcoming and comforting work. In the afternoon, he lost his patience and threw everything to the newly appointed provincial governor, Pei Ju. At around 3 in the afternoon, Ouyang Shua arrived at this special prison with his personal guards. In the dark and damp prison, the former king of Somalia was being held. Ouyang Shua did not want to see this person, but this person claimed that he wanted to make a deal with him in exchange for top-secret information. Ouyang Shua thought that he was deliberately mystifying things, but the king of Somalia said the words, "Silver Hand." This piqued Ouyang Shua's interest, which was why he went to the prison. When the Friendship City was attacked, Ouyang Shuo had a vague feeling that the matter was not as simple as the Somali royal family. Now it seemed that it was true. Open the door! The dark and damp prison only had a small skylight at the top, and it was hard to see the sun. The floor was covered with a layer of straw, and a tattered mat was placed on top of the straw. Other than that, there was nothing else. Standing at the entrance of the prison, and looking at the old man with disheveled hair curled up in the dark corner, Ouyang Shuo found it hard to believe that this was the majestic king of Somalia. It seemed that the king of Somalia had suffered a little during the arrest. Entering the prison, a pungent smell assaulted Ouyang Shuo's nostrils, causing him to frown. The prison was temporarily guarded by the Somali Corps. Seeing this, the temporary head of the prison carefully said, "Your Majesty, this place is dirty. Why don't we interrogate him in the interrogation room?" The conditions of the prison should not have been so bad, but the soldiers of the army hated the king to the core, and thus intentionally made things difficult for him, and arranged the worst cell. Ouyang Shuo waved his hand. "No need, this prince will leave after saying a few words." As he spoke, he looked at the Somali king expressionlessly and said, "Tell me, what deal do you want to make with me? Everything I've done was planned by a mysterious person." "I met that person just a few days ago," said the Somali king in a hoarse voice. "How do you know he's from the Silver Hand?" "He told me personally. He also said that as long as I can repel the first wave of attacks, they will have a way to stop Great Xia from attacking Somalia again." The king of Somalia wanted to say conquest, but he swallowed the words. Ouyang Shuo glanced at him indifferently and said, "Confess everything you know and this king will spare your life." "Then, can I leave Somalia?" Ouyang Shuo laughed. "What do you think? Even if this king lets you go, I'm afraid you won't be able to leave." Putting this person under house arrest was the greatest mercy Ouyang Shuo could offer. As for whether any accidents would happen during the house arrest, which would lead to the Somali king's death, there was no guarantee. Ouyang Shuo's black-bellied and callous nature was no longer the same as before. The Somali king's face was gloomy. He also knew that the people of the royal city hated him to the core. "Don't have any more delusions. If what you confess does not satisfy this king, then wait to be hanged." "This way, I can comply with the people's wishes," Ouyang Shuo said indifferently. The Somali king trembled in fear and said, I'll write. Seeing this, Ouyang Shuo no longer had any interest in talking to this person. He turned around and left the prison. The Black Snake Guards would be in charge of the following investigation, so Ouyang Shuo did not need to worry. The next morning, Pei Ju rushed over to report on the investigation of the treasury. Pei Ju could not hide the joy on his face. It was obvious that he had gained a lot. He said with a smile, "Your Majesty, after the investigation of the Bones of Wood treasury and the palace's inner treasury, a total of 2.55 million gold coins, 56 boxes of jewelry, and more than 5,000 kilograms of various spices were confiscated. In addition, there are 2 treasures to present to your Majesty. There were hundreds of thousands of resources in the treasury and inner treasury, but Pei Ju only mentioned the key points. Somalia's weapons and equipment were backward. Even the so-called quality goods stored in the treasury could not enter the eyes of Great Xia, so Pei Ju did not mention it. Ouyang Shuo was taken aback. He did not expect the Somali royal family to be so rich. It was a stark contrast to Somalia's barren land. But when he thought about it, he understood. It could be assumed that most of the gold, silver, and other treasures were obtained through cooperation with the pirates. Previously, when the Atlantic Fleet annihilated the Skywolf pirates' lair, they had also plundered large amounts of gold, silver, and jewelry. With these 2.55 million gold coins, coupled with the 1 million from Gaia, as well as the expected income from the future auction of the Bones of Wood Satellite City Guard Guild, the direct income was about 7 million gold coins. If the income from the earlier annihilation of the pirates was included, it would reach 8 million gold coins. According to the Privy Council's preliminary calculations, the immediate war expenses and post-war compensation, as well as the subsequent reorganization of the army and the replacement of relevant weapons and equipment, the total military expenditure was about 1 million gold coins. The cabinet's budget for the reconstruction of Somaliland province, including the infrastructure and port construction, was about 1.5 million gold coins. Other than that, the restoration of Friendship City and the compensation to the merchants were about 500,000 gold coins. With this calculation, not only did the imperial court not need to allocate additional funds to Somaliland province, but they could also earn a net income of 5 million gold coins. It was a huge profit, and Ouyang Shuo was very satisfied. Indeed, war was the fastest way to accumulate wealth. Considering that the end of the year was approaching, Ouyang Shuo needed to reserve a sum of money in advance for the second global auction. Therefore, Ouyang Shuo put the remaining 5 million gold coins into his personal pocket. As for the gold, silver, jewelry, and spices, Ouyang Shuo got Pei Ju to pick some of the best and send them to the palace's inner treasury. The rest were sold to the 3 royal merchants, and the money obtained was transferred to the imperial court's treasury. This was not a small sum, and it could be sold for at least 1.5 million gold coins. Ever since Gaia, Ouyang Shuo had continuously stored gold, silver, and jewelry in the inner treasury dozens of times, piling up like a mountain. It was impossible for Song Jia and Binger to use all the jewelry alone. However, as the ruler of a country, Ouyang Shuo had to reward his meritorious subordinates. Song Jia also had to reward female officials or other women, so she had to store a batch of gold, silver, and jewelry in the inner treasury. To put it bluntly, this was used to win over the hearts of the people. Only when the inner treasury was full could the royal family maintain its reputation. Ouyang Shuo was most interested in the 2 treasures that Pei Ju mentioned. He took them and checked them one by one. A map and a talisman. The map was a goatskin map. It looked a little old, as though it had been soaked in seawater for a long period of time. There were even seaweed remnants. Ouyang Shuo felt excited when he saw the name of the map. Lemurian Civilization Ruins Exploration Map. With this map, the player can trigger the corresponding storyline mission in the sea near the Lemurian Civilization ruins. As for the specific effects, the player can explore it himself. After coming into contact with the Atlantis civilization, Ouyang Shuo specially flipped through the information on prehistoric civilizations. Among them, the one that interested Ouyang Shuo the most was the Lemurian civilization, which was as famous as the Atlantis civilization. He did not expect that by chance there would be a day that he would form ties with this mysterious civilization. Looking at this ancient map, Ouyang Shuo's hands faintly trembled, and he was extremely excited. Without a doubt, the prehistoric civilizations that Gaia took the trouble to introduce into the game were not just for show. For example, the Atlantis civilization had brought novel technology that surpassed the technology tree of the era. The Great Xia dynasty was the biggest beneficiary of this technology. Be it the underwater breathing apparatus or the mimic aircraft, they had played an important role in the Great Xia's previous foreign wars. They could often win by surprise and became the trump card of the Great Xia dynasty. The current Atlantis city had become the focal point of the Mediterranean Sea. Legend had it that there were 4 famous prehistoric civilizations. They were the Jendaya civilization, the Mu civilization, the Atlantis civilization, and the Lemurian civilization. The Jendaya civilization existed in the first solar era. It was a civilization with superpowers. Legend had it that the males of the Jendaya had the third eye and had superpowers such as prediction and killing. Legend had it that the Jendaya continent was located in the Atlantic Ocean between Africa and South America. The Mu civilization was also known as the Mu continent. It gave rise to the Mu Empire, which was rumored to be the first great empire on earth. The king was called Ram. Ra represented the sun, and Mu represented the mother. Therefore, the Mu Empire was known as the Empire of the Mother of the Sun. Legend had it that the Mu continent was located in the Pacific Ocean and was located in the south. Its area was equivalent to the area of North and South America combined. Then there was the Lemurian civilization. Legend had it that the Lemurian civilization was the third civilization that appeared on Earth after the destruction of the Mitram continent. They were the descendants of the survivors of the Mitram continent. The Lemurians were thin and weak. They were unable to resist the attacks of the beasts and other races on the surface. Therefore, they lived underground and possessed extremely advanced technology. The Lemurians of that era focused on sensibility and honed their sensibility as their main training. Those who had accumulated the highest level of training could distinguish between 3,000 colors and 2,500 fragrances. Legend had it that the Lemurian continent was located in the Indian Ocean, near Australia, and continuously extended towards the Pacific Ocean. However, its specific location was unknown. Ouyang Shua speculated that it should be near Australia. It just so happened that Ouyang Shua planned to embark on his second ocean voyage in October. His destination was Australia. He hoped to open up a new ocean route and solve the problem of the Great Xia dynasty's shortage of iron ore, coal, and other natural resources. In that case, he would have the opportunity to come into contact with the mysterious Lemurian civilization. Chapter 924. Putting away the Lemurian ruins exploration map, Ouyang Shua looked at the talisman. War-stopping talisman. Once used, outside of a state war, one can designate any royal city and prohibit the royal city's imperial guards from participating in the Overlord's War for 1 week. After the war exemption card, Ouyang Shua obtained another strange item. As mentioned before, the royal city's imperial guards couldn't take the initiative to leave the city and engage in battle with the Lord's army in the wilderness. The only exception was if a territory in the wilderness applied for the protection of the royal city and voluntarily became a vassal of the royal city. In this way, the royal city army could send troops in the name of exercising the right of protection. The effect of the War Stop Talisman was that even if a territory applied for protection, royal city would not be able to send troops to intervene in a war between territories for a week. There was no doubt that this talisman would come in handy if used well. Shanghai City, Song Manor. While Ouyang Shua was patrolling Somalia, Great Xia's queen, Song Jia, took advantage of her free time and went home to visit her relatives. After the commotion, Song Tianxiong, the head of the Song family, had this conversation with his daughter. "Daughter, have you and His Majesty ever thought of having children?" Song Jiao was clearly startled. She said in astonishment, "Children? Father, this is still the game world." "So what if it's a game world? You can still have children." What Song Tianxiong said was true. The interstellar migration would take 10 years just on the road. Gaia was not inhumane. After players got married in-game, they could also apply for children. The reason why he said apply was because this child was not a virtual baby, but a real life. In the game, the husband and wife would jointly apply to have children. After paying a certain fee, Gaia would directly extract their sperm and eggs through the game capsule for in vitro fertilization. With the current level of technology, fertilized eggs did not need to be sent back to the mother's womb. Instead, they could be directly nurtured in the nourishment chamber. The nourishment chamber was also specially made. It could connect the mind of the baby to the game and keep in sync with the baby in the game. In other words, the mother in the game was pregnant for 10 months, and the baby in reality was slowly forming in the nourishment chamber. When a baby was born in the game, every frown and smile was the true reflection of a real baby. The two were 100% synchronized. Husband and wife didn't have to go offline, and they could raise their children just like in real life. That was why there was a fee, and it wasn't cheap at all. There were two reasons. Firstly, the special nourishment chamber and the subsequent nourishment liquid for the baby were not a small expense. The second was to limit the number of newborns through fees. Everyone was still traveling in space, and the spaceship's resources were limited. If there were no restrictions, it would not be able to accommodate too many newborns. Therefore, giving birth in the game was something that only the rich could enjoy. It was basically out of reach for ordinary players. As for why Gaia did not introduce a virtual baby, it was a matter of family ethics. No parents would be willing to wholeheartedly love a virtual data created by Gaia. Song Jia was an intelligent woman. She asked quietly, "Why did father suddenly mention this?" "It's not that sudden. You've been married to His Majesty for a year and a half, so it's normal for you to have children. Besides, His Majesty should have an heir after ascending the throne to bring peace to the country." Song Tianxiong's expression did not change. Song Jia gave her father a deep look and said, "I will tell His Majesty about this matter. Everything is up to His Majesty." Song Tianxiong shook his head. He was exasperated that his daughter didn't live up to his expectations. He advised, "Daughter, you have to make your own decision on this matter. Don't blame me for not reminding you. Although His Majesty hasn't taken a concubine, you haven't had any children. The ministers in the court will definitely think of ways to request His Majesty to take a concubine to ensure the royal family's bloodline continues. Although His Majesty only dotes on you, I've heard that there are more than one woman involved with His Majesty. Daughter, don't fail miserably and let other women beat you to it. He won't." Song Jia was filled with confidence. Song Tianxiong said earnestly, "Daughter, a person's heart can change. His Majesty's power is growing by the day. There are more than 100 women who want to cling to him. As time goes on, who can be certain? Don't tell me you don't know how the brothers at home are like?" Song Jia still refused to believe that her husband was a philanderer. But when she thought of the brothers at home, they were just ordinary children of a family clan. None of them did not flirt outside. With this in mind, Song Jia's confidence began to waver. When Song Tianxiong saw this, he said, "Regardless, only by having a child can your position be stable." Song Jia finally nodded and said, "Got it. I'll talk to His Majesty." Speaking of which, Song Jia really wanted a baby. That way their family would be perfect, wouldn't it? That's good. Song Tianxiong was overjoyed. On the 8th of August, Ouyang Shuo returned to Shanghai City after staying in Somalia for only 3 days. Unlike Morocco, during the Battle of Somalia, the cabinet officials followed behind the army to take over the city. In addition, the Somali king had lost the support of the people, which made the establishment and restoration of the province exceptionally smooth. With Pei Ju, an old official, in charge, Ouyang Shuo really did not have to worry much. Before leaving Mugu City, the Black Snake Guards handed over the confession of the Somali king. The confession described in detail the 2 transactions that the mysterious man, who was the representative of the Silver Hand, had with the Somali royal family. At this point, the Silver Hand's ambition to interfere in Somali affairs and destroy the Great Xia dynasty's friendship city was clear and irrefutable. Ouyang Shuo looked at the confession with an indescribable sarcasm in his eyes. He turned around and handed the confession to the accompanying scholar of the Secret Literature Pavilion, Qingyi, and said, "Send this confession to the Violet Negotiation Group. I think it will be of great use." "Yes." Qingyi nodded. Ouyang Shuo was in a hurry to return to Shanghai City because there were 4 high-ranking officials waiting to meet him in the city. They were the former Kunming County Governor Bai Hua, the former Guilin County Governor Fan Zhongyan, the former Shaozhou County Governor Hu Guang, and the former Fuyong County Governor Sun Yu. With the opportunity of Pei Ju's promotion to Somalia's governor, Ouyang Shuo finally made up his mind to fill the positions of the governors of Yunnan, southern Sichuan, Lingnan, and Minnan provinces. The imperial edict promoted Bai Hua to be the governor of Yunnan, Fan Zhongyan to be the governor of southern Sichuan, Huguang to be the governor of Lingnan, and Sun Yu to be the governor of Minnan. The value of the 4 governors was more than a level higher than that of the governors of Morocco and Somalia. Although the governor of the Great Xia dynasty was limited to a province, it was comparable to a game map that was 10 times larger. Even without the factor of population density, it was comparable to the governor of the Qing dynasty. Among the 4 governors, Bai Hua's promotion was a matter of course without any controversy. As the most senior historical official of the dynasty, Fan Zhongyan had served as the chief of administration, the Wuzhou County governor, and the Guilin County governor. It could be said that he had worked hard and made great contributions. After weighing the pros and cons, Ouyang Shuo still promoted Fan Zhongyan to the governor of southern Sichuan. As a famous minister, although Huguang's experience could not be compared to Fan Zhongyan's, he was capable enough to manage the affairs of a province. His promotion to the governor of Lingnan was not opposed. However, it was inevitable that Song Wen was a little lonely. Seeing that Mu Lanyue and Bai Hua had been promoted to governor, as Song Jia's brother and the Jiaozhou County governor, Song Wen could not help but have some thoughts about the position of Lingnan's governor. Ouyang Shuo was not foolish and fulfilled Song Wen's wish. Mu Lanyue was promoted to governor because she had taken the initiative to integrate into the system of Shanghai City from the beginning. Bai Hua had used the huge Kunming County as a bargaining chip to obtain the capital to be promoted. What about Song Wen? Not only did the Song family lose Tianchuan County, they also needed Shanghai City to clean up their mess. Although Song Wen was capable, he was not capable of managing a province. Since that was the case, how could Ouyang Shuo be biased and promote Song Wen to the position of governor? It could even be said that because of the relationship between Song Wen and Song Jia, Ouyang Shuo would be more cautious when using Song Wen than other officials. If Song Wen had understood this, he would not have had this idea. Song Tianxiong, on the other hand, was more insightful than his son. He took the opportunity of Song Jia's visit to suggest that Song Jia should have a child. Only if Song Jia had Ouyang Shuo's child could the Song family's position in the dynasty be as stable as Mount Tai. As expected of an old fox. Among the 4 governors who were promoted, the only one who slightly disagreed was Governor Sun Yu of Minnan. It was not that Sun Yu was incapable. Historically, Sun Yu had been the minister of the Chao Wei camp for a long time, which was also the prime minister. He had been in charge of military affairs for more than 10 years and was respectfully called Lord Sun. Such a talented person would naturally be able to handle the government affairs of a province. The one who disagreed was that Sun Yu had joined the dynasty not long ago and was too inexperienced. It was against the rules of officialdom to promote him to a high position so quickly. Ouyang Shuo did not care much about these disagreements and still promoted Sun Yu. After all, among the 4 county governors of Minnan province, Sun Yu was the only one who could bear the responsibility. Some people suggested that the appointment of the governor of Minnan be put on hold for the time being. After Sun Yu had accumulated some experience as the governor of Fuyong County, the appointment could be made. Many ministers agreed with this suggestion. Ouyang Shuo still did not accept it, for no other reason than that Minnan province urgently needed someone to oversee the overall situation as the sway moved into Quanzhou. Ouyang Shuo did not want to ruin the affairs of the imperial court because of some rules. In this way, the matter was finally settled. With the promotion of the 4 governors, the administrative offices of the 4 provinces were confirmed one by one. Needless to say, Yunnan province was set in Lingxi city of Kunming County. If there were any changes in the future, it would be after the imperial court conquered Dali. Chao Kan, the county governor of Dongchuan province, took over the position of the county governor of Kunming and continued to assist Bai Hua. There was no dispute about the administrative office of Chuanan province. It was set in Tianjing City of Xuanzhou County. Bao Shuya, the county governor of Xuanzhou County, continued to guard Xuanzhou County. Zhenhai City of Jiaozhou County was chosen as the administrative office of Lingnan Province. Song Wen also continued to serve as the county governor of Jiaozhou. Lastly, Longshuan City of Fuyong County was chosen as the administrative office of Minnan Province. Like Yunnan Province, it was only possible to change the administrative office after conquering Quanzhou in the future. Fang Xiaoru, the former county governor of Longyan County, took over the position of the county governor of Fuyong County. The 4 vacant county governors of the 4 provinces were all promoted from local officials in the wilderness to fill the vacancies. Chapter 925. Shanghai City, Xia Palace. In the imperial study, Ouyang Shuo first went to see Yunnan's governor, Bai Hua. The two of them were old friends. Bai Hua finally got what he wanted and became the governor-general, overseeing the affairs of a province. Although he did not have absolute military power, his power was not much different from that of Lord Chunshan and the others. The governor was in charge of the affairs of the province, the army, the civil and military, and the officials. This also meant that the local guards and reserve forces were under the governor's control. As for the field troops stationed in the province, they were not under the governor's jurisdiction. Even so, the governor was considered the highest level of officials. In the context of the dynasty's civil and military rule, there were few important officials who could supervise the civil and military. Bai Hua was familiar with Yunnan, so Ouyang Shuo would not give him orders. He only mentioned Steel City, which was temporarily under the direct control of the Yunnan governor's office, in hopes that the governor's office would increase support for the steel industry. Bai Hua took the initiative to ask. The Privy Council ordered the governor's office to gather supplies. Is it because the court is going to use troops against Sichuan North? Ouyang Shuo shook his head. Bai Hua had guessed wrong this time. Ever since Di Chen arranged for Zhang Yi to be poisoned, Ouyang Shuo had the intention to teach the Yan-Huang alliance a lesson. Handan City was far away and Ouyang Shuo could not do anything to Di Chen. He could only set his sights on the nearby swordsman city. This time, he must cut off one of the Yan-Huang alliance's arms. Ouyang Shuo did not hide it and said with a smile, "It's not Sichuan North, it's Swordsman City." Long before the war in Somalia, the Grand Council had already drawn up a huge military plan. The resources involved were not only the dynasty's army but also many allies. There was no doubt that every confrontation between the Shanghai Alliance and the Yan-Huang Alliance, no matter who started it or who was involved, would eventually evolve into a confrontation between two alliances. Attacking Swordsman City was like pulling one hair and affecting the whole body. They had to be fully prepared. Bai Hua was shocked. Are we going to fight them head-on? As a former member of the Shanghai Alliance, Bai Hua was eager to fight with the Yan-Huang Alliance, but he was also worried. If the two sides really fought, it would be a battle to the death. Ouyang Shuo nodded, saying, "Feng Wu told me that the Yan-Huang Alliance is planning something big. Looks like they haven't given up yet. They keep provoking me, so don't blame me for being ruthless." Before, Ouyang Shuo had wanted peace, and didn't want to start a war with the Yan-Huang Alliance. He didn't want to waste the strength of the China region. When the sandpiper and the clam fight, the fisherman benefits. However, Di Chen and the others kept playing dirty tricks, which made Ouyang Shuo realize that as aristocratic families, Di Chen and the families behind them, they had already placed the interests of their families above the interests of the country. Although the Federation had been established and there were no more countries on Earth in the traditional sense, the representation of a country's territory in the game world would still arouse the emotions of family and country that flowed in the blood of players. The aristocratic families didn't have this kind of family-state relationship, or rather, they didn't want to have it. The Silver Hand was an organization that transcended national boundaries and only had family interests in its eyes. Just like the aristocratic families of ancient times, no matter how the dynasties changed, the aristocratic families would not perish. Therefore, even if Ouyang Shua stopped, Di Chun and the others wouldn't give in. They were always thinking of ways to contain the great Xia dynasty. Realizing this, Ouyang Shua wouldn't be lenient. If he didn't beat them up and cripple them, Di Chun and the others would really think that the aristocratic families were still ruled by the aristocratic families. Bai Hua was silent. Alright, it's time to end this. Ouyang Shua wasn't as optimistic as Bai Hua. As the saying goes, a starving camel is still bigger than a horse, and a centipede is still alive. Di Chun and the other big families wouldn't be defeated so easily. Moreover, it was only the 4th year of Gaia, so Ouyang Shua had plenty of time. Before leaving, Bai Hua said, "Don't worry, I'll help you keep an eye on the Yunnan side." Ouyang Shua nodded. With such a confidant, what more could he ask for? After sending off Bai Hua, the governor of southern Sichuan, Fan Zhongyan, walked in. "Your humble servant greets the king." Fan Zhongyan bowed deeply, unable to hide his excitement. Previously, when he was competing for the position of Guilin County, Fan Zhongyan had a secret confrontation with Xuanzhou County's governor Bao Xia. Even though Fan Zhongyan had won, he could faintly feel the king's estrangement. Fan Zhongyan never expected that the king would still choose him for the position of southern Sichuan's governor. In this way, Fan Zhongyan really felt grateful to the point of shedding tears. The feeling was really complicated. Ouyang Shua didn't feel that emotional. It was the art of an emperor. In 2 to 3 years, although Fan Zhongyan had changed, Ouyang Shua's transformation was earth-shattering. The Ouyang Shua of today was no longer the tiny mountain sea village lord of the past, but a world-class lord who dominated a region, the supreme king of the great Xia dynasty. If it was said that when Fan Zhongyan first came to the territory, Ouyang Shua had to humbly seek advice and serve Fan Zhongyan as a half-teacher, learning the ways of an official, then the Ouyang Shua now had absolute control over the relationship between ruler and subject. Fan Zhongyan was the same. He had long regarded himself as a pure subject, not daring to have any other thoughts. The conversation between the ruler and subject lasted for an hour, and it all revolved around the planning of the southern Sichuan province. According to the system of the Ming and Qing dynasties, the southern Sichuan province was a province of Zhili, and its status was extraordinary. The governor of Zhili in the Qing dynasty was the head of the 8 governors. However, in the Great Xia dynasty, Ouyang Shua didn't intend to deliberately highlight the status of the southern Sichuan province. The governor of the southern Sichuan province was the same as the other governors and didn't have other titles. According to the official system of the Great Xia dynasty, the governor of a province was a third-rank official. If Ouyang Shua wanted to promote the rank of a governor, he could be given the title of Deputy Minister of the 4 Great Academies or even Minister of the 4 Great Academies. He could be promoted to a second-rank official or even a first-rank official. This method was the same as the Qing dynasty governor being given the title of Minister of War. It was an empty position, and the governor's rank and treatment would be improved, so that the governor could do things more easily. The 4 governors had just taken office and hadn't made any convincing achievements, so how could they receive such treatment? It was already 11 o'clock when they finished Fan Zhongyan's report. Hua Guang and Sun Yu's reports could only be arranged until the afternoon. At noon, Ouyang Shua held a banquet in the palace to entertain the 4 new governors. To the governors, this was a supreme honor, and it showed their status as the new nobles in the imperial court. There were more than 1,000 officials in the imperial court. After the inner court elders, the 4 ministers, the deputy ministers, the chamberlain of Honglu, and the imperial censor, the 4 governors had the highest status. In terms of real power, the governors were second only to the inner court elders and the 4 ministers. Therefore, the 4 of them were the new nobles in the imperial court, and they were favored by the king. After the lunch banquet, Ouyang Shua rested for a while, Then he received Governor Huoguang of Lingnan. Huoguang's ascension made the Huo brothers the focus of the imperial court once again. Of the two brothers, one was the commander of the imperial guards in the army, and the other was a local governor. They could be said to be extremely high-ranking officials. How could such an honor not make people jealous? There were many rumors, and even the imperial censor wanted to impeach Huoguang. They said that Huoguang was a powerful minister in history, and that he was ambitious and couldn't be allowed to hold a high position, and so on. This impeachment was suppressed by Ouyang Shua. In history, although Huoguang was a powerful minister, not long after his death, the entire Huo family was executed. It was impossible for Huoguang to not be touched by such a bloody lesson. Moreover, Ouyang Shua wasn't the emperor that Huoguang had appointed. As the founding emperor, his power suppressed the four seas. Which powerful official could go against Ouyang Shua? No matter who it was, as long as they had such thoughts, they would be faced with a destructive blow. Huoguang was a smart man. In history, when he walked the path of a powerful official, it was also because the times created heroes. This time, he was in the wilderness and in Great Xia, so he definitely didn't dare to have such thoughts. Ouyang Shua's main purpose in meeting Huoguang was to appease this important official, so that Huoguang wouldn't have any scruples and could do whatever he wanted in Lingnan province. When Huoguang heard this, he shed tears of gratitude. The last one to report was Governor Sun Yu of Minnan. Sun Yu was probably already aware of the twists and turns in his appointment, but on the surface, he didn't show any flaws. His ability to maintain his composure was top-notch. The ruler and the official didn't care about these small details. In addition to reminding Sun Yu about the trade with Great Sway, Ouyang Shua mainly mentioned that he hoped Sun Yu could use his influence among the aristocratic families to recruit more talents from the three kingdoms for the imperial court. For example, Guojia and Sun Yu. At present, Great Sway already had the strength and magnanimity to accommodate the aristocratic families. When Sun Yu heard this, he nodded in agreement. This time, he was promoted to governor of Minnan, which was enough to prove His Majesty's sincerity and magnanimity. Sun Yu also felt that the investigation should come to an end, and those people should also come out of seclusion. In this way, the ruler and the official were naturally happy. After the report, the four governors didn't immediately leave Wangqing. Although the governor's appointment had been given, the governor's yamen was still just an empty shell. For Governor Bai Hua of Yunnan and Governor Sun Yu of Minnan, it was fine. The provincial administration was in their original places of office, so it was more convenient for them to do things. Fan Zhongyan and Huoguang were miserable. They were in a foreign place and were unfamiliar with the people and the place. The four feudal officials had to stay in Wangqing for the time being and cooperate with the cabinet in the construction of the governor's yamen. Ouyang Shua had already informed the cabinet that the governor had the right to recommend the subordinates of the governor's yamen. In order to make the governor's yamen operate better and more smoothly, the four feudal officials naturally had to transfer a few satisfactory subordinates to the yamen. In addition to cooperating with the cabinet in the selection of officials, even if the four were already feudal officials, they had to visit the various yamens of the imperial court, network and get closer to each other since they finally returned to Wangqing with great difficulty. Human relations were not unnecessary in the officialdom, especially between the local officials and the officials of the capital. As the saying went, a county official is better than a local official. How could the future administration of the governor's yamen bypass the various yamens of the imperial court? Ouyang Shua could only turn a blind eye to this. As long as there was no bribery, he didn't care. He thought that the four governors were all smart people and wouldn't do anything stupid. If they really did, there were two major agencies, the Shanghai Guards and the Imperial Censorate, watching. Chapter 926. It was already 5 o'clock in the afternoon when he finished receiving the debriefings from the 4 newly appointed governors. After the 4 governor-general's offices were set up one by one, the various departments of the imperial court had their workload reduced by more than half due to the addition of an administrative layer in the middle. Before the establishment of the 4 governor-general's offices, the imperial court had jurisdiction over 2 overseas provinces and 20 counties. After the establishment, there were 6 major provinces and 4 counties, Jili, Cheongzhou, Izhou, and Xingzhou, reducing the number of local yamens by 12. This would greatly increase the efficiency of the imperial court. After sending Sun Yu off and reviewing 3 memorials, Ouyang Shuo returned to the palace. During dinner, his wife, Song Jia, had a strange expression on her face. She wanted to say something but hesitated. Seeing this, Ouyang Shuo said with a smile, "Madam, if you have something to say, you might as well say it. You don't have to hide it from me." "Wui, I want a baby," Song Jia said in a low voice. Ouyang Shuo was stunned for a moment. "You're saying to have children in-game?" If there were any settings in the game that Ouyang Shuo was unfamiliar with, the child system was definitely one of them. In his previous life, Ouyang Shuo was a single dog and a poor man. Naturally, he didn't understand. In this lifetime, Ouyang Shuo was busy with matters, so he naturally didn't have the time to understand these settings. Seeing this, Song Jia smiled and said, "It's not easy. There are still settings that you don't know about." She then introduced the childbearing system in the game in detail. When Ouyang Shuo heard this, he turned to look at the curious Bing and said, "I'll tell you more at night." Song Jia nodded. After dinner, they strolled in the back garden for half an hour to digest the food before returning to the bedroom. Bearing children was not only a virtue of human relationships, it could also continue the bloodline of the Ouyang family. It could also help stabilize the dynasty's rule and appease the people. Since Song Jia had taken the initiative to mention it, Ouyang Shuo naturally had no reason to refuse. Ouyang Shuo and Song Jia opened their personal stats panel at the same time and officially submitted a request to Gaia. System notice. Congratulations! Player has activated the childbirth system. Testing conditions for childbirth will begin. System notification. Inspecting the system notice. Detected player not wearing clothes, current ID. Ouyang Shuo, male, 27 years old. Player like a dream, current ID. Song Jia, female, 27 years old. The 2 of them are legally married and have met the conditions to have children. During their wedding in-game, they had obtained a legally valid marriage certificate through Gaia. Therefore, be it in the game or in reality, the 2 of them were legally married. System notification. Test passed. Please select the gender of the baby and whether it is twins. Since it was in vitro fertilization and the cultivation of nutrition chambers, the highly developed medical technology had long been able to realize the gender orientation of the baby. Fortunately, gender equality had been realized in the 22nd century, and the concept of child-rearing had long since changed. Ouyang Shuo and Song Jia had already discussed this matter in advance. According to Ouyang Shuo, since they were going to have children, they might as well have a pair of twins. Good things come in pairs. Ouyang Shuo didn't want Song Jia to suffer too much. "I choose a pair of twins." System notification. The twins have been confirmed. Do you want to go through the gene screening? The so-called genetic screening was the use of genetic technology to identify the harmful genes of the fertilized egg, such as rigid hereditary diseases, congenital physiological defects, and so on, to ensure that the best babies were born. Choose. There was nothing to hesitate about. System notification. Genetic screening confirmed. Do you want to choose genetic modification? Compared to genetic screening, genetic modification was a more advanced technology. For example, if the parents were not handsome or pretty, through genetic modification, the baby would have a perfect appearance. Appearance was only the most basic, and it could even transform the body of a baby. Ouyang Shua didn't hesitate as he said, transforming the baby's body, enhancing the constitution, and aiding in cultivation. With the release of authentic manuals in-game, the era of cultivation for all had arrived. Undergoing physical modification at the fertilized egg stage was undoubtedly a win at the starting line. As for unimportant factors like appearance, Ouyang Shua didn't plan on undergoing genetic modification. It was better to choose natural ones. Besides, with Song Jia's beauty and Ouyang Shua's handsomeness, the offspring they produced would definitely not be bad. System notification: genetic modification confirmed. Please choose if you want to synchronize the birthing process in-game. Friendly reminder: if you choose synchronization, the mother will not be able to cultivate during the pregnancy. Gaia meant that if they chose synchronization, the in-game Song Jia would have to experience the entire pregnancy process for 10 months from beginning to end. If they didn't synchronize, the baby would be formed 10 months later, and it would be simulated in-game, eliminating the birthing process in the middle. It would be extremely easy. Song Jia didn't hesitate as she said, choose synchronization. Although being pregnant for 10 months was tough, it was a critical period for a mother to establish a bloodline connection with the baby. It was a critical process to stimulate maternal instincts. Without this link, life would be incomplete. This was especially so for a woman like Song Jia who was giving birth for the first time. She couldn't miss such an opportunity. Although such a choice was equivalent to Song Jia giving up on cultivating for 10 months, she was still willing. Ouyang Shua naturally respected Song Jia's choice. It was her right as a mother. System notification: synchronization confirmed. Selection complete. Beginning calculation of birthing cost. Every choice was related to the cost. Therefore, it needed to be calculated comprehensively and not simply categorized into different grades. The one that cost the most was undoubtedly genetic screening and genetic modification, especially genetic modification. System notification: calculating system notification, conditions, twins. Genetic screening, genetic modification, and synchronized birthing. Basic cost 300,000 gold coins. Middle grade package 500,000 gold coins. High grade package 1 million gold coins. High grade package 2 million gold coins. Please choose the package. Friendly reminder: the cost includes all costs from in vitro fertilization to the birth of the fetus, all the way to the arrival of the planet of hope. Ouyang Shua asked, what's the difference between the different packages? Although he didn't mind spending 2 million for his children, he needed to know where he was spending it. System notification: the package combines factors such as the grade of the nutrient solution, the level of the nutrient chamber, the level of genetic technology, and the level of daily supervision. It's definitely worth it. Friendly reminder: if you choose the top grade package, the baby will receive a unique and mysterious gift after birth. Ouyang Shua was quite speechless. It was as good as not saying anything. It even whetted Ouyang Shua's appetite. However, Ouyang Shua had to give full marks for the advertising. Thankfully, Ouyang Shua had the financial resources to do so. Naturally, he didn't want to mistreat his children. Choose the top grade package. System notification: selection complete. Automatically deducting 2 million gold coins. Friendly reminder: according to the time calculation, the birth of the twins will be on the 15th day of the 5th month of the 5th year of Gaia. Please look forward to the birth of the new life. Gaia was really powerful. Even before the birth date, it was so accurate that there wouldn't be the slightest deviation. While modern technology was convenient, it also took away a lot of fun. With a whoosh, the 5 million gold coins that Ouyang Shua had obtained from Somalia was reduced by 2/5. If it was converted to real money, it would be an astronomical figure. It was no wonder that giving birth in the game was a treatment only the rich could enjoy. How was this an ordinary baby? It was practically a golden baby. After the application was completed, the couple looked at each other and smiled. Their love was finally about to usher in the fruit of their love. That night, the two of them enjoyed each other's company. August 9th, Atlantis City. Just as Ouyang Shual was busy receiving the four governors, the trade negotiations between the Great Xia dynasty and the Mediterranean Sea finally had a breakthrough. The key factor that affected the negotiations was not the Somali confession that Ouyang Shual had submitted. The confession could only be said to be the icing on the cake. In fact, the moment Somalia was wiped out by the Great Xia dynasty, the pride and restraint of the Mediterranean Sea lords were shattered. With Somalia and Morocco, the Great Xia dynasty controlled the only two gateways to the Mediterranean Sea. If the Great Xia dynasty fell out, the merchant ships of the Mediterranean Sea countries wouldn't even be able to leave the Mediterranean Sea. To the Mediterranean Sea lords, this was no different from a bolt from the blue. They had no choice but to give in. Violet, who had been ruthlessly bullied, naturally wouldn't be polite. During the negotiations, he pursued the enemy, constantly brandishing his knife to cut the enemy's flesh. After obtaining the key confession, he forced the Mediterranean Sea lords into a desperate situation. The situation of the trade negotiations was completely reversed. This was also the norm for negotiations. Real negotiations were never limited to the negotiating table, but the game outside and the comparison of strength. It could be said that the Great Xia dynasty's attack on Somalia was also a part of the negotiations. On this point, the Mediterranean Sea lords could only concede defeat. They were forced into a corner by Violet and had no choice but to seek help from Queen Kalia, asking her to mediate and get Great Xia to show mercy. Not long ago, Kalia had also helped Great Xia to persuade the Mediterranean Sea lords to restart the negotiations. They didn't expect the tables to turn so quickly. Chapter 927. P.S. Sorry for the late update. Before leaving, Violet had received instructions from Ouyang Shual. He knew that Great Xia didn't want to have a dispute with the Mediterranean countries. Their aggressiveness at the negotiating table was just to put on a show. Since the Mediterranean lord had invited Queen Kalia, Violet naturally stopped. Not only did he achieve the goal of the negotiation, but he also returned a favor to Queen Kalia. Based on this point, Queen Kalia and the Mediterranean lord would pay more attention to her in the future. Violet relented, and the trade negotiations between the two sides immediately made a breakthrough. The detailed rules were soon to be finalized. Unexpectedly, just as both sides were about to sign the contract, the Great Xia negotiating team suddenly received an urgent letter. The urgent letter contained an edict from the king, and the content was very concise. Caesar City is not within the scope of this negotiation. All the ports of the Great Xia dynasty will not be open to Caesar City's caravans. Violet looked at it and rubbed his forehead. This condition is really too satisfying. During the negotiation, the one who nitpicked the most, spoke the most sarcastic words, and harbored the greatest hostility towards Great Xia was the self-righteous Caesar. Violet was extremely annoyed. Among the lords of the Mediterranean Sea, Caesar was the most annoying. During the war in Somalia, as soon as Great Xia suffered a setback, Caesar publicly declared, "Great Xia's militarism has caused unrest in the Mediterranean Sea and its surrounding areas. Today's defeat is retribution." Now, the war in Somalia had ended with Great Xia's complete victory. The one who suffered retribution wasn't Great Xia, but Caesar. Retribution was truly unpleasant. "Let's see how you make a fool of yourself tomorrow." Violet snorted and was in a good mood. In the conference room in Atlantis, that morning, the negotiators from both sides gathered together to sign the final trade agreement. The main members of the Great Xia delegation were all present, while the Mediterranean lords sent Henry, Cassius, Caesar, and other heavyweight lords. Henry was the representative of the Mediterranean lord. The difficult negotiations finally ushered in the final signing of the contract. The members of both sides were in a good mood. Even Caesar put away his usual sullen face and laughed with the other Mediterranean lord. There was no doubt that the signing of the trade agreement would benefit all the territories in the Mediterranean Sea, including Caesar City. With money, Caesar could realize his ambition. Caesar's aggressiveness during the negotiation was only because he wanted more and was greedier than Henry and the others. After all, Caesar was not a fool. Caesar's hostility towards the Great Xia dynasty and prejudice towards Ouyang Shua were merely racial prejudice that was ingrained in their bones. Caesar, who claimed to be a descendant of the ancient Roman Empire, could not bear to see the yellow-skinned people acting like tyrants. As a witness for both sides, Curia presided over the signing ceremony. At first, the atmosphere was quite harmonious. After the representatives of both parties were introduced, Violet spoke up and said with a smile, "Before we officially sign the agreement, I would like to announce something on behalf of Great Xia." "Please speak." Kalia was a little surprised. This was not part of the procedure. On the other side, Harry and the others trembled in their hearts. Could it be that Great Xia is going to go back on their words? Following the destruction of Somalia, Great Xia had the absolute dominance in this negotiation, and Henry and the rest couldn't help but worry. Caesar jumped out and said with a frown, "One must keep his word." Violet looked at Caesar with a faint smile and said, "Receive my king's decree." This time, the trade agreement signed between Great Xia and the Mediterranean Sea territories does not include Caesar City. "What did you say?" As soon as Violet finished speaking, Caesar immediately exploded. His gaze was sharp, and it was as if he wanted to eat someone. This unforeseen event really caught Caesar off guard. Violet's expression didn't change as he said, "Great Xia's caravans will not stay at the port of Caesar City. Similarly, all the ports of Great Xia will not be open to Caesar City's caravans. Have I made myself clear enough?" "You are going too far." Caesar was furious. Violet said, "In view of the fact that the Kaiser Overlord has recently made some extremely unfriendly remarks about Great Xia does not think that there is any need to continue to cooperate with Caesar City." Caesar's expression froze and his face turned red. He was choked to the point where he couldn't speak. The other Mediterranean Sea Lords were originally also puzzled by Great Xia's sudden action, but after listening to Violet's explanation, they suddenly realized that this was the root cause. Everyone present knew about the public remarks that Caesar had made against Great Xia not long ago. Caesar would never have dreamed that he would lose such a huge benefit just because of a moment of carefreeness. Basically, without the cooperation of Great Xia, the caravans of Caesar City wouldn't be able to reach the east. This would be a devastating blow to Caesar City's ocean-going trade. Some of the lords present felt sorry for Caesar City, but there was no lack of schadenfreude. For example, Henry and the others were extremely happy to see Caesar suffer a setback. At the same time, they were also a little shocked by Great Xia's ruthless method. From the looks of it, Great Xia was definitely not the kind of person who wouldn't retaliate after being bullied. Ouyang Shua's action was also to make an example out of Great Xia. Caesar was, after all, an ambitious and ruthless person. He quickly calmed down and said sinisterly, "Since Great Xia is unwilling to cooperate with Caesar City, is there still a need to sign this agreement? You are openly provoking the Mediterranean Sea and playing us, the lords, like monkeys." Caesar was trying to drag the entire Mediterranean Sea Lord into this mess. Unfortunately, Violet wasn't fooled. Caesar City is Caesar City, and it doesn't represent the entire Mediterranean Sea. Violet looked at Caesar mockingly. Great Xia has always been sincere in cooperating with the Mediterranean Sea. I'm sure everyone present can feel this sincerity. Even if Great Xia has the advantage, they are not willing to be aggressive. Thinking of Great Xia's concession, the Mediterranean Sea Lord couldn't help but nod. Only Caesar's face became more and more gloomy. Violet continued, however, "The premise of cooperation is mutual trust. I'm sure no one is willing to cooperate with the enemy. Since Lord Caesar has publicly opposed Great Xia, it's obvious that he has no intention of cooperating with Great Xia, right? Caesar was being mocked by Violet and wished he could find a hole to hide in. In terms of a vicious tongue, no one present could compare to Violet. She had a flirtatious look in her eyes, but the words she said were enough to make people vomit blood. Caesar said coldly, "In that case, the Great Xia caravan can forget about passing through the Mediterranean Sea." It seemed that Caesar was ready to fight to the death. Caesar City was located in the Italian region in the middle of the Mediterranean Sea. If the Roman fleet under Caesar harassed the Great Xia caravan, the impact would be huge. However, Violet was very confident. She turned to look at Henry and the others and said, "The prerequisite for Great Xia to sign a trade agreement with the Mediterranean Sea is that you have to ensure the safety of the Great Xia caravan in the Mediterranean Sea. I don't think everyone here wants to control the situation of the entire Mediterranean Sea because of the selfish behavior of one territory, right?" Henry was silent. Violet's words had touched on an even more sensitive topic. That was, after Great Xia's Atlantic fleet withdrew from the Mediterranean Sea, who would control the seas in the Mediterranean Sea. Among them, the most competitive were Henry's Gallic fleet, Caesar's Roman fleet, and Cassia's Spanish Invincible fleet. Among the three major fleets, the Roman fleet was the latest to be established. Compared to Spain and France, Italy wasn't considered a traditional maritime hegemon, so it was the weakest. The Gallic fleet and the Spanish Invincible fleet were originally evenly matched. However, during the Battle of Morocco, the Spanish Invincible fleet was full of confidence. They didn't expect to be crippled by Great Xia's torpedoes. After the battle, the Spanish Invincible fleet lost nearly half of its warships and became the weakest of the three major fleets. It couldn't even compare to the Roman fleet, which made them dejected. Henry's Gallic fleet reaped the benefits of Great Xia's victory and became the strongest fleet in the Mediterranean Sea. It had to be said that Henry was the most cunning among the lords of the Mediterranean Sea. It was no wonder that some people said that Henry was a fox that didn't bark. Henry couldn't understand the meaning of Violet's words better than anyone else. If Henry and the other lords of the Mediterranean Sea acquiesced to the Roman fleet harassing the Great Xia caravan, it would not only affect the trade between Great Xia and the Mediterranean Sea, but it would also damage the Gallic fleet's dominance in the Mediterranean Sea. Henry couldn't accept either of them. This concerned the control of the seas in the Mediterranean Sea, and no one could take a step back. More importantly, the smart Henry keenly grasped a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity from Violet's words. Even though the lords of the Mediterranean Sea were united against a common enemy, in fact, they all had their own plans. This trade negotiation was full of twists and turns, and all kinds of opinions and factions were entangled. However, one thing was clear. That was, none of the feudal lords would be willing to fall out with the Great Xia dynasty just because Caesar City had offended the Great Xia dynasty and fallen out with the Great Xia dynasty. The negotiations between the territories weren't child's play. It involved real commercial interests. Otherwise, why would they bother to negotiate with the Great Xia negotiation team until now? No one was a selfless lay foe. Violet's words could be seen as an attempt to sow discord, but it could also be seen as an opportunity. Using interests as a bond and the signing of a trade agreement as an opportunity, he could lead the other territories in the Mediterranean Sea to isolate Caesar City. To put it bluntly, if Caesar really arranged for the Roman fleet to harass the Great Xia caravan like he said, it would be equivalent to completely destroying the trade between Great Xia and the Mediterranean Sea and destroying the jobs of the other Mediterranean Sea territories. No one would accept this. The lords of the Mediterranean Sea present were all smart people, and they quickly came to their senses. They looked at Caesar with rather unfriendly gazes. When Caesar saw this, his heart trembled, and he had a bad premonition. Henry secretly glanced at one of the lords, who was his secret ally. When the Lord received the signal, he immediately stood up and said, "Caesar, you can't represent the Mediterranean Sea. You can't let your emotions affect your decisions and destroy the interests of the entire Mediterranean Sea. That's too selfish." "What did you say? I'm selfish?" Caesar was furious. "Harming others without benefiting yourself? If that's not selfish, then what is?" I. Caesar was so angry that he couldn't speak. He said angrily, "You traitors!" Chapter 928. P.S. Make up for the missing update from yesterday. Seeing that Caesar was exasperated, Henry finally spoke. "Caesar, maintaining the prosperity of the Mediterranean Sea is our common goal. We can't let your emotions affect our decisions and destroy the overall situation. Please calm down." Caesar glared at Henry and spat, "Bah, the overall situation is like **T. Seeing this, a cold light flashed in Henry's eyes and he said faintly, "Since you insist on doing things your own way, we can only unite our fleets and restrict the Roman fleet's travel in the Mediterranean Sea." Caesar's move was undoubtedly what Henry wanted. "How dare you?" Caesar was so angry that he slammed the table and stood up. However, looking at the Mediterranean Sea lords on both sides, Caesar's heart gradually sank. Not to mention the small and medium-sized lords, they obviously followed Henry's lead. Even Cassius did not refute Henry's proposal. Thinking of this, Caesar's heart sank. "It's a conspiracy, all of this is a conspiracy." Caesar was horrified. Henry and Cassius, the arch-enemies, wanted to take this opportunity to restrain the Roman fleet. Although this gave the Gallic fleet a chance to continue to grow, it also won a precious opportunity for the Spanish Invincible fleet to catch up with the Roman fleet again. A win-win situation. In this big show, the only one who was down was Caesar. Caesar was furious. He could no longer stay in the face of the humiliation and left angrily. "Just you wait." Before leaving, Caesar left a harsh sentence. Henry was calm. He turned to look at Violet and said with a smile, "The irrelevant personnel have left. Can we officially sign the trade agreement?" Violet watched the big show between the Mediterranean Sea lords, and her heart was in turmoil. These lords were really ruthless. They ate people without spitting out the bones. "Sure." Violet put away her emotions and smiled sweetly, charming all living beings. "No matter how they fight, Great Xia's goal has been achieved." Thinking of the man who was thousands of miles away and controlling this negotiation behind the scenes, Violet's eyes were distant, and she thought to herself, did he already expect all this? Since when has that man's mind become as deep as the sea? Violet felt inexplicably melancholic. After that, the signing of the contract went smoothly, except for an additional clause. The Lord of the Mediterranean Sea must unconditionally protect the safety of the Great Xia caravan in the Mediterranean Sea. If the caravan is damaged, the Lord of the Mediterranean Sea will bear the consequences. In order to clarify responsibilities and prevent wrangling, the feudal lords of the Mediterranean Sea had to deposit a risk deposit with the Bank of the Four Seas in advance based on the volume of their trade. Once the Great Xia caravan was damaged, the Bank of the Four Seas would deduct it from the deposit according to the compensation clause in the marine insurance contract. With Ouyang Shua's suggestion and Meng Jida's execution, the Bank of the Four Seas insurance business was already on the right track. In particular, maritime insurance was one of the main types of insurance. Not only were the Great Xia caravans insured, but even the caravans from the other territories in the China region were also insured. Meng Jida's next goal was to gradually expand his maritime insurance business to the whole world with the help of the 3 maritime nodes in Star State County, Somalia Province, and Morocco Province. The feudal lords of the Mediterranean Sea were convinced by Great Xia's flawless plan. Fortunately, the deposit was a risk deposit in the Four Seas Bank, and the bank paid interest based on the deposit. Otherwise, it would have been a huge loss. At 11 o'clock in the morning, Under the witness of the Queen of Kaliao, the Xia dynasty and the lords of the Mediterranean Sea officially signed a trade agreement, the Trans-Mediterranean Trade Partnership Agreement. The main provisions of the agreement were as follows. Firstly, ports. All ports within the borders of the members of the agreement would be open to other members, and no additional barriers would be allowed. Secondly, tariff. Import and export tariffs would be greatly reduced to promote the development of ocean trade. Thirdly, investment. The entry threshold for investment would be reduced. Chambers of commerce from member territories would be allowed to enter and invest, and no additional barriers would be allowed. Without a doubt, the Trans-Mediterranean Trade Partnership Agreement was very close to a free trade agreement in reality. For the entire game world, this would be a milestone event. Through the signing of a free trade agreement, tariffs and non-tariff barriers for most goods would be eliminated, and market access restrictions for most services would be removed. Investments would be opened up, and goods, services, capital, technology, personnel, and other factors of production would be promoted, complementing each other's strengths and promoting common development. The benefits of free trade were obvious. Firstly, by reducing transaction costs and circulation fees, trade liberalization and facilitation would be promoted, and ultimately, the development of ocean trade would be promoted. Costs were reduced, and transactions were convenient. Naturally, more and more caravans would invest in the ocean adventure, setting off a new wave of ocean trade. Secondly, by promoting investment, it would have the effect of optimizing the global industrial structure and resource allocation between the territories, especially between the Eastern and Western territories, because of their different historical backgrounds, technology trees, and industries. They would be able to complement each other. With all these benefits, it was no wonder that Caesar was furious when he found out that he had been excluded from the system. Losing this opportunity was undoubtedly a heavy blow to Caesar's city. In order to protect the interests of trade, Henry and the others would never allow Caesar to stir up trouble in the Mediterranean Sea. The calculations within were really full of twists and turns. In the afternoon, Violet, Henry, Cassius, and other lords of the Mediterranean attended a global press conference to announce the signing of the Trans-Mediterranean Trade Partnership Agreement. When the news came out, the whole world was shocked. Some people cheered, some were disappointed, some were terrified, and some were uneasy. No one would have thought that the Mediterranean Sea and the Xia dynasty, which had always been in conflict with each other, would finally move towards cooperation, creating a new era of ocean trade in the game world. Because it was too shocking, Caesar's city's unexpected elimination was ignored, and they became pitiful creatures that no one cared about. Some people predicted that this would be the most influential event in the game in the past 4 years. Its significance and far-reaching influence even surpassed the establishment of the world's first dynasty, the Xia dynasty. And with the implementation of the Trans-Mediterranean Trade Partnership Agreement, the Xia dynasty would gradually change from a trading country to a trading power, expanding its global hegemony in an unexpected way. The deeper meaning behind it was thought-provoking. Ouyang Shuo, who was thousands of miles away, received the news and smiled leisurely. No one in the world knew better than Ouyang Shuo what this meant. After learning about the existence of the Silver Hand and the academics, Ouyang Shuo had been thinking about a question. What should the great Xia dynasty do? According to conventional means, Ouyang Shuo could rely on the advantages that the Xia dynasty had accumulated in the early stages to defeat the weak, and use the strong to bully the weak. He could set off a global war of extermination, bathing the world in blood and intimidating the world. But what would the Xia dynasty get in the end? At the same time as it continued to expand, more and more enemies would gather around the Xia dynasty, and these enemies would abandon their prejudices and become more and more united. The continuous transformation and adjustment of the Yen-Huang alliance and the continuous integration of the internal was a clear proof. At that time, the Xia dynasty would become the enemy of the whole world and step by step towards the abyss of destruction. The ancients had a saying, "A good rider will fall from a horse, a good swimmer will drown, a good drinker will get drunk, and a good fighter will die." Those who conquered the whole world with pure force would become the enemy of the whole world, and would eventually die under force. It could even be said that Ouyang Shua thought further. Whether it was the Silver Hand or the academics, they would not tolerate the existence of a behemoth that was completely above them. If the Xia dynasty was really militaristic and made enemies everywhere, perhaps the Silver Hand and the academics would not be able to do anything to the Xia dynasty in the game, but when they arrived on Hope Planet they had plenty of means. Instigating the enemies of the Xia dynasty to resist Ouyang Shua together was too easy for them, who had been playing politics all their lives. Maybe the Silver Hand could take this opportunity to whitewash themselves. Because they were getting rid of evil for the people, getting rid of the cancer of the Xia dynasty, and returning justice to the world. Just thinking about this made Ouyang Shua shudder. The enemies and struggles that Ouyang Shua had to face were no longer limited to the game world. This was also the trial that Ouyang Shua had to go through if he wanted to truly walk the path of a king. Only in this way could he be reborn from the ashes. Since it was impossible to massacre the whole world, the Xia dynasty had to find another way. Through this period of observation and thinking, Ouyang Shua's thoughts gradually became clear. What the Xia dynasty had to do was to expand its global hegemony with the smallest cost of destroying the country. Under the banner of win-win cooperation, it would continue to penetrate its influence around the world and pull more and more people onto the giant ship of the Xia dynasty. In this way, the Xia dynasty would be unshakable. The benefits of doing so were not limited to this. It would also help to subtly disintegrate the internal alliance of the Silver Hand and divide it. An organization that was united by interests would eventually go their separate ways because of interest. Caesar being ruthlessly abandoned by Henry and the others was the best evidence. Because of the intervention of the Xia dynasty, Caesar would not be able to rise as a new force in the European continent and become one of the three giants of Europe in the future. The light emitted by this descendant of ancient Rome was getting dimmer and dimmer. Signing the Trans-Mediterranean Trade Partnership Agreement with the Mediterranean Sea was an attempt by Ouyang Shua. He wanted to use this opportunity to send a message to the world's lords that the Xia dynasty not only brought war, but also profit. The Xia dynasty was not a warmonger that only knew how to destroy countries and slaughter cities. At the same time, it was also a businessman, a helmsman and navigator that promoted global trade. Towards the Xia dynasty, there was no need for the territories to be wary and hostile. Of course, if the Xia dynasty really wanted to establish hegemony on a global scale, sometimes it had to use thunderous means, such as attacking Somalia or kicking Caesar City out of the game. These means were very necessary. A hegemony without military deterrence and without military strength as a backing was ultimately just a rootless duckweed. Chapter 929. America District, Liberty City. When Jack learned that Great Xia had signed the Trans-Mediterranean Trade Partnership Agreement with the Mediterranean Sea, he couldn't help but exclaim, "Good means, good courage, and good heart." Jack was getting more and more interested in this opponent. August 12, Shanghai City. The trade agreement was successfully signed, and the negotiation team was about to return. Shanghai City also welcomed a joyous event. The Queen of Great Xia is pregnant. Once the news came out, the imperial court was in an uproar, and hundreds of officials congratulated her. When Song Tianxiong heard the news, he was in a good mood and laughed heartily. The queen had a child, and there was hope for the continuation of the empire. Ouyang Shua issued an edict saying that the empress was pregnant and that the whole world should celebrate. He pardoned the whole world to show the emperor's kindness. As such, the whole nation celebrated, and the emperor was generous. On this day of celebration, two Sui and Tang generals sought refuge in the Great Xia dynasty. These two were none other than Shan Xiongxin and Wang Bodong, the two Wagong heroes. Xia Palace, Martial Hall. After verifying their identities and registering them, Du Ruhui, the military minister, led the two of them to formally pay their respects. At present, the Great Xia army was in urgent need of a batch of mid-level generals. When Ouyang Shuo received the news, he decided to meet them personally. Otherwise, it would be appropriate to hand them over to the Bureau of Military Affairs to make arrangements. General Shan Xiongxin pays his respects to the king. General Wang Bodong pays his respects to the king. In the main hall, the two Wagong heroes paid their respects at the same time. Ouyang Shuo sat on the throne, looked down, and sized up the two people in the hall. Shan Xiongxin, who appeared in the wilderness, was a middle-aged man with small eyes, a short beard, and a righteous face. He didn't look like a general, but more like a Jianghu hero. Shan Xiongxin was courageous and good at using a lance. He had a good relationship with Su Shiji and swore to live and die together. At the end of the Sui dynasty, Shan Xiongxin and Su Shiji joined Di Rang's Wagong army to rebel against the Sui dynasty. After Di Rang was killed, during the battle between Li Mi and Wang Shichong, Shan Xiongxin surrendered to Wang Shichong, and Su Shiji defected to the Tang dynasty. In the third year of Wuda, Li Shimin led the army to attack Luoyang. Shan Xiongxin led the army to attack Li Shimin, but Su Shiji appeared to stop him, and Shan Xiongxin retreated. In May of the same year, Wang Shichong was defeated by Li Shimin and surrendered. Li Yuan ordered Shan Xiongxian and the other generals to be executed. Su Shiji pleaded with Li Shimin, hoping to spare Shan Xiongxian's life, but was rejected. Inside the prison, Shan Xiongxian consoled Su Shiji. "It's all right, I know I will definitely die." Su Shiji said, "It is difficult to be loyal and righteous at the same time. After you die, I will take care of your family." As he said that, he cut off a piece of his flesh and gave it to Dan Xiongxian to eat, to show that he did not forget the oath he made. After Shan Xiongxian ate it, he was ready to die. According to the official history, the Old Book of Tang, Shan Xiongxian was a valiant general. But during the Yuan and Ming dynasties, Shan Xiongxian's image was gradually vilified in the dramas, and people despised him. Interestingly, Shan Xiongxin was killed by Li Yuan. At the end of the Tang dynasty, Shan Xiongxin's 11th-generation grandsons, Shan Xing, Shan Wang, Shan Mao, and Shan Xing, joined the Huang Chao uprising. They were known as the Four Heroes of the Huang Army. It could be said that retribution was an eye for an eye. Name: Shan Xiongxin, King level, Dynasty, Sui Dynasty, Identity, General of the Great Xia Dynasty. Profession: Advanced General Loyalty, 65 points. Commander: 68 Martial Power, 82 Intelligence, 55 Politics, 45 Specialty. Brave: increases troops' attack power by 20, increases marching speed by 20. Martial Arts: none equipment. Golden Top Juju Lance. Evaluation: Xiongxin is valiant and skilled in using the lance. He is the best in the army and is known as the Flying General in the army. Wang Bodong stood beside Shan Xiongxin. His long hair was tied into two small braids. He had the style of an alien. He had a mustache and a pair of bright eyes, as if he was hiding something on his mind. This person's real name was Wang Yong, and his courtesy name was Bodong. He was a general in the Wagong stronghold and a student of Li Mi. He followed Li Mi to the Wagong stronghold and became Li Mi's confidant. Li Mi and Wang Shichong fought a decisive battle, and Wang Bodong was ordered to guard the rear base, Jinan City. Not long after, Li Mi's army was defeated, and Wang Bodong abandoned Jinan City to meet with Li Mi. Li Mi decided to surrender to the Tang dynasty, and Wang Bodong expressed his willingness to follow him to the death. After surrendering to the Tang dynasty, Li Mi decided to rebel because he was not put in an important position by Li Yuan. Wang Bodong tried hard to persuade him, but he decided to live and die with Li Mi. After Li Mi attacked Taolin County, he wanted to join his subordinate General Zhang Shanxiang. On the way, he was ambushed by Tang General Xing Yanshi. Li Mi and Wang Bodong both died. Name: Wang Bodong, King Level, Dynasty, Sui Dynasty. Identity: General of the Great Xia Dynasty. Occupation: High-level general. Loyalty: 60 points. Commander: 70. Martial power: 75. Intelligence: 58. Politics: 45. Specialty: Mounted archery, increases the archer's attack power by 20, increases marching speed by 20. Martial arts: None. Equipment: Nameless Bow. Evaluation: A loyal man with unparalleled archery skills. Some people said that Wang Bodong was a loyal man, while others said that he was foolishly loyal. He chose an unreliable master like Li Mi and did not know how to adapt to the situation like Qin Qiong and the others. Ouyang Shuo looked at the two people in the hall, and his heart was also full of doubts. Wang Bodong took the initiative to join him, but his loyalty points just passed. It was really strange. Ouyang Shuo could not help but ask, if Wang Bodong appeared in the wilderness, then where was Li Mi? Li Mi was born into an aristocratic family. At the end of the Sui dynasty, when the world was in chaos, he became the leader of the Hua Gang army, called Duke Wei. He led the Hua Gang army to defeat the Sui army, and his prestige shook the world. Because Li Mi killed the old master of the Hua Gang army, Zhai Rang, it caused internal instability and was defeated by the Sui army. Later, he was recruited by King Yangdong, and because of the heavy losses in the battle with Yuan Huaji, he was defeated by Wang Shichong and led the remaining troops to surrender to Tang Li. Not long after, he betrayed Tang and was killed by Tang General Xing Yanshi in Bear Ear Mountain. It could be said that Li Mi was a treacherous hero. Such a person had a hero like Wang Bodong who pledged his life to follow him. It really made people sigh. Although there were doubts in his heart, Ouyang Shuo did not show it. After meeting the two people, he discussed with Du Ruhui and determined where they would go. Shan Xiong Xian was transferred to the Somali army as the commander of the division to strengthen the Somali army. Wang Bodong was placed in the 2nd City Guards Army as the commander of the division under Mu Guiying. Wang Bodong was suspicious. It was because of this that Ouyang Shuo arranged for him to be under his eyes. He wanted to see what tricks Li Mi was playing. As for transferring Shan Xiong Xian to the Somali army, it was Ouyang Shuo's painstaking effort to let Shan Xiong Xian escape from this whirlpool and not be involved in this matter. In principle, Ouyang Shuo admired fierce generals like Shan Xiong Xian. Furthermore, Shan Xiong Xian had Su Shiji behind him, which made Ouyang Shuo even more move. Ouyang Shuo could sense that when Shan Xiong Xian knew that he was going to be sent to the overseas army, he secretly heaved a sigh of relief, which confirmed Ouyang Shuo's guess. Shan Xiong Xian and Wang Bodong were not on the same side, and even if they were, he was forcefully pulled onto the ship. Returning to the imperial study, Ouyang Shuo summoned the Mountain Sea Guards commander Shin Buhai. "Your Majesty," Ouyang Shuo said, "send people to secretly keep an eye on Shan Xiong Xian and Wang Bodong, especially that Wang Bodong. Keep an eye on him, see who he is secretly communicating with." "Yes." Shin Buhai nodded. "If you find out that Li Mi is behind this, immediately arrange for the Shadow Guards to capture him, regardless of whether he is dead or alive." Ouyang Shuo did not want to play any game with Li Mi. Maybe Li Mi thought that he had the qualifications to stir up the world, but in Ouyang Shuo's eyes, he was just an obstacle that could be removed at any time. "Your Majesty, rest assured." Shin Buhai was also full of confidence. On the 13th of August, Violet led the negotiation team back to Shanghai City. Ouyang Shuo personally went to the teleportation formation to welcome them, and gave the negotiation team the highest treatment. The secretary of the Secret Texts Pavilion, Lang Bai Nanpu, announced the rewards that the imperial court had given to the negotiation team. Other than being rewarded with gold, silver, and jewels, some of the officials were also promoted. "Thank you, Your Majesty." Violet took the lead to thank him, his eyes no longer playful. After this trip abroad, Violet's understanding of Ouyang Shua had deepened, and he did not dare to be presumptuous. That afternoon, another piece of important news was released. The Commerce Department of the Great Xia Dynasty announced that the trade caravans of Handan City, Blood Red City, Overlord City, Danyang City, Swordsman City, Loye City, and Azura City were not within the scope of the Trans-Mediterranean Trade Partnership Agreement. They would not be able to enjoy the corresponding tariff benefits and investment convenience. Of course, in view of the Great Xia Dynasty's promise to share the trade route, the trade caravans of the Yen-Huang Alliance could still do business on the Grand Line, and the ports along the way would not refuse to stop for supplies. However, compared to other trade caravans, the cost of transportation and taxes would increase. At the same time, the Commerce Department of the Great Xia Dynasty announced that the trade caravans of the other territories in the China region would not be restricted, and they could enjoy the same treatment as the Great Xia trade caravans. On one hand, he was suppressing the Yen-Huang alliance, and on the other hand, he was roping in the neutral territories. Ouyang Shua's Tai Chi was played to perfection, and everyone could not help but praise him. When the news came out, it naturally caused a huge uproar. The trade caravans within the borders of the Yen-Huang alliance wailed. During this period there was bound to be some turmoil, and it was even possible that a large number of trade caravans would leave. The trade caravans of the other territories in the China region were gearing up, and they were ready to take advantage of the east wind set off by the Great Xia Dynasty to show off their skills in the ocean trade. The special products of the China region would be continuously transported to the Western countries through the Grand Line. To be honest, the Great Xia Dynasty's move was quite surprising. In the past, the Great Xia Dynasty had always been passively retaliating against the provocations of the Yen-Huang alliance, and they were used to remaining silent. This time, the Great Xia Dynasty took the initiative, and they attacked the Yen-Huang alliance heavily, without the slightest mercy. Such a situation was really rare. Some people joked that the Yen-Huang alliance's trade caravans had been blacklisted by the Great Xia Dynasty, and their situation was worrying. This time, the Great Xia Dynasty completely shed all pretense of cordiality with the Yen-Huang alliance. This made the onlookers very excited, but some people who were worried about the country and the people were anxious. There was a rumor that the Great Xia Dynasty's move was revenge for the Yen-Huang alliance's previous attempt to poison Zhang Yi. This way, ordinary players would not be able to criticize the Great Xia Dynasty. At most, they could only say, "The Yen-Huang alliance reaped what they sowed. If you don't have the strength, don't provoke a lion." Chapter 930. This time, Great Xia also blacklisted Dali and Chengdu, the two royal cities. Dali and Chengdu had a hostile relationship with Great Xia. Ouyang Shua didn't stand on ceremony and went straight to the point, putting an end to these two royal cities' thoughts of taking advantage of him. When the news came out, the caravans from the two royal cities were equally anxious. With the opening of the Grand Line, the proportion of ocean trade in China's trade share has increased month by month and now accounts for more than 30%. Missing out on the free trade was undoubtedly a huge loss to the royal cities' caravans. Just as the Dali and Chengdu chambers of commerce were feeling anxious, news came from Shanghai City that Great Xia would welcome the chambers of commerce to move into Shanghai City and enjoy special treatment. Everyone knew who this news was directed at. According to the grapevine, when Liu Bei, the emperor of Shu, received the news, his face was clearly red with anger. However, in order to maintain his image as a gentleman, he pretended that nothing had happened. It was really interesting. Fortunately, Guan and Zhang, who would cause trouble for Liu Bei, were not around. Otherwise, there would be another storm. As for what kind of treatment the Chuanzhou caravan would enjoy, Emperor Xia, Ouyang Shuo, had already announced, let the Sui dynasty send someone to Shanghai City for a discussion. It was obvious that Great Xia was going to raise the price. Handan City, Lord's Mansion. Not long after Great Xia blacklisted the Yan-Huang alliance, Di Chun and the others gathered together to discuss. This is too much. The one who spoke was Lord Chunshan. Danyang City, which had started off as a merchant, had made use of the convenience of the Yangtze River waterway to gradually expand its ocean trade. Who would have thought that just as the trade started, it would encounter such a bolt from the blue? No wonder Lord Chunshan lost his composure. Di Chun and the others pretended not to hear. Lord Chuanshan's words were too disgraceful. The Great Xia did not owe the Yan-Huang alliance anything, and the two were mortal enemies. How could there be bullying? This time, the old fox is going to completely fall out with us. Di Chen's face was unprecedentedly solemn. He looked at everyone present one by one. We have no way out. Xiong Ba and the others remained silent, their hearts heavy. Previously, Great Xia was always on the receiving end of their attacks, and they didn't think much of it. However, this time, Great Xia took the initiative to attack, pressuring the Yan-Huang alliance to the point where they couldn't even breathe. Only now did Di Chen and the others realize how powerful the Great Xia had become. It was suffocating. Since there's no way out, let's fight to the death. The one who spoke was Xiong Ba. The fighting spirit in his eyes did not diminish, and he had the demeanor of an ambitious and formidable person. Among everyone present, only military Kill Ripper, Wandering Linghuan, and Feng Qingyang did not speak much. The territories of these three families were located in the northwest region, but they had no connection with ocean trade. The impact of this round of ban on them was almost zero. Not long ago, Feng Qingyang finally ended his seclusion. After he came out of seclusion, it was no surprise that he once again took charge of Swordsman City. His younger sister, Feng Qinyue, who had done a good job, had to leave dejectedly. The Feng clan's tradition of valuing men over women was not something that could be changed in a day or two. Lord Chunshan glanced at Xiong Ba, Di Chun and Wolf Warrior and said unhurriedly, "Didn't the three of you also form a naval fleet? Whether you are a mule or a horse, you should take it out for a spin. If Great Xia can rely on an ocean-going fleet to open up a route to Europe, why can't we?" The incident of Ouyang Shuo charging into Europe with just a fleet last year had long been spread in the streets, causing countless adventurers to worship him endlessly. Who here didn't know that? Lord Chunshan was trying to provoke him. You mean, open up the Pacific Ocean route and do business with the American region? Di Chen asked. What's wrong with that? Lord Chunshan was after all born into a merchant family. When it came to ocean trade, his eyes lit up. The American market is in no way inferior to the European market. It has great potential. If we really open up the route, we can also turn around and ban Great Xia. Lord Chunshan still found it hard to calm down. Xiong Ba was the first to nod and said, I think we can give it a try. Since the fleet of Liberty City can reach us, it proves that there is no problem with this route. If we want it to go smoothly, we can directly contact Jack and ask him to send us a nautical chart. Jack is such a proud person. He will not be satisfied with the old fox taking the lead and will definitely agree. Xiong Ba's words finally moved Di Chen. He nodded and said, Then it is decided. I will contact Jack later. We also need to make preparations to form a joint fleet. No problem. Xiong Ba and Wolf Warrior nodded at the same time. Ouyang Shuo's provocation had unexpectedly led Yan-Huang alliance on a different path from his previous life. The route between the China region and the American region would be opened up at least a year in advance. 15th of August, Shanghai City. In response to Ouyang Shuo's request 2 days ago, in less than 2 days, Great Sui sent a high-level diplomatic mission to Great Xia to discuss free trade. Yesterday, Great Sui's embassy in Great Xia had already sent an official note to the Chamberlain of Dependencies. Upon receiving the report, Ouyang Shua arranged for the cabinet head Jiang Shang to be in charge of receiving the diplomatic mission. On this point, Ouyang Shua would not be rude. Inspired by Great Sui's Four Quarters Embassy, Ouyang Shua ordered people to build a Four Quarters Embassy near the capital. It was specially used to receive diplomatic missions from various countries, and its scale was even grander than Great Sui's Four Quarters Embassy. One could imagine that in the future Great Xia would definitely be a place where all countries would pay homage to. Thus, Great Xia's Four Quarters Embassy wasn't just a simple building. Instead, it was a cluster of buildings that were divided into 5 main areas: East, West, South, North, and Center. The West Court was the Europe Pavilion, the South Court was the Africa Pavilion, the East Court was the Asia Pavilion, and the North Court was the America Pavilion. At the very center was a 9-story tower of 10,000 kingdoms, the gathering place for diplomatic missions. Great Sui's diplomatic mission was placed in the East Court, and they were the first batch of diplomatic missions after the construction of Four Quarters Embassy. At around 4 in the afternoon, Jiang Shang rushed over to report on the negotiations with Great Sui's diplomatic mission. In the imperial study, Jiang Shang smiled and said, "Your Majesty, you will never guess who the leader of the diplomatic mission is." Ever since he became the cabinet head, Jiang Shang had gotten closer to Ouyang Shua. Ouyang Shua smiled. "Is it Gao Ying or Su Wei?" "Neither." Jiang Shang shook his head. "It's Great Sui's king of Jin, Yang Guang." "Pooh! Who do you think it is?" Ouyang Shua nearly spat out the tea in his mouth. No matter how Ouyang Shua thought about it, he couldn't have imagined that Emperor Wen would arrange for Yang Guang to lead a diplomatic mission to Great Xia. Was there something wrong with the emperor's head? To think that he would arrange for an unpopular prince to lead such an important diplomatic mission. Jiang Shang said, "Based on this old subject's observation, there is an 80% chance that Yang Guang was the one who requested for the diplomatic mission. Who knows how many means and connections he used in the process?" Among the princes of Emperor Wen, the most special thing about Prince Jin, Yang Guang, was that in history Yang Guang was an emperor. Even if he appeared in the wilderness, he had a group of famous officials and generals following him, such as Yu Shiji, Zhang Jin, and Lai Hu. Even the important officials during Emperor Wen's reign, such as Yu Wenshu and Su Wei, had a period of friendship with Yang Guang. Therefore, they couldn't be considered as Emperor Wen's people. Of course, some of the officials and generals under Yang Guang were already people of Great Xia. For example, Governor Pei Ju of Somaliland Province, Pei Yun, the head of the Civil Affairs Bureau, Zhang Shutua, Qin Qiong, and Luo Shixin. As for the valiant General Shi Wansui, he was purely a general during Emperor Wen's reign. Speaking of which, Great Xia and Great Sui were quite related. Back to the main topic, it was precisely because Yang Guang had people following him. After he appeared in Xuanzhou, even if Emperor Wen didn't like him, Yang Guang could still speak in the imperial court of Great Sui. There's no choice, there are people in the imperial court. Even Crown Prince Yang Yong couldn't compare. Yu Shiji and the others were not fools. They knew that even if they didn't follow Yang Guang, they would still be suspected by Emperor Wen. Based on Emperor Wen's suspicious character, he would definitely not put these old officials of King Jin in an important position. Instead of that, they might as well work together to fight for the right to speak. Therefore, Ouyang Shua wasn't surprised that Yang Guang was able to get the opportunity to go to Great Xia. What Ouyang Shua was surprised about was why Yang Guang came. No matter what, it had nothing to do with free trade. Currently, Great Sui still belonged to Emperor Wen. Yang Guang didn't have to worry about this. Did Yang Guang say anything? Ouyang Shua asked Jiang Shang. Jiang Shang nodded and said, "Yes, he secretly passed me a note, hoping to have a private talk with your Majesty. He said that he has something important to discuss." Ouyang Shua's eyes narrowed as he pondered. After a while, he said, "If that's the case, make the arrangements tonight." "Yes, Your Majesty." Ouyang Shua wanted to see what Yang Guang was up to. It was nighttime, the moon was bright and the stars were sparse. The East Court of the Four Quarters Embassy. In an inconspicuous room in the southwest corner of the East Courtyard, Yang Guang finally met Emperor Xia. When the Four Quarters Embassy was built, the construction department took into account the need for private meetings with some of the envoys. Therefore, they designed a few secret locations. This room was one of them. In the evening, as usual, Jiang Shang represented Great Xia and invited the Great Sui's envoys to a banquet at the East Courtyard. During the banquet, Yang Guang used an excuse to get some fresh air and was quietly brought here by the guard. "Emperor Xia, it's an honor to meet you." After all, Yang Guang was once an emperor and had an extraordinary temperament. Ouyang Shua smiled and said, "Long time no see, Emperor Jin." Because they were leaving halfway, Yang Guang couldn't stay for long to avoid attracting the attention of other members of the envoys. Emperor Wen of Sui was suspicious. Even though he reluctantly agreed to let Yang Guang lead the team, he still planted many spies in the envoys. The two exchanged greetings and Yang Guang went straight to the point and said, "I hope Emperor Xia can help me get rid of Yang Yong." Ouyang Shua's eyes flashed and thought to himself that it was as he expected. Ever since he knew that Yang Jian's sons all appeared in Chuanzhou, Ouyang Shua faintly guessed that the Sui dynasty was about to start another fight for the throne. Yang Yong and Yang Guang, this pair of sworn brothers, would eventually have to fight. What was different from history was that this time, Emperor Wen of Sui stood firmly on the side of the crown prince, Yang Yong. During the negotiation with the Xia dynasty, Emperor Wen of Sui even had the idea of sending Yang Guang to Shanghai City as a hostage. No one knew how mad Yang Guang was when he heard the news from the secret agents of the Shanghai Guard. In short, Yang Guang completely lost confidence in Emperor Wen of Sui. As such, Yang Guang had no room to perform and could only rely on external forces. Yang Guang could only think of the Xia dynasty. He was smart and knew that there must be a reason for the Xia dynasty's friendly last time. Therefore, he tried to get the opportunity to lead the team to the Xia dynasty. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.